story kicks off at the royal capital, right at the Craftsman's Guild. A young craftsman's examining this ornate clock tower, taking note that this is today's job. From the outside, the clock doesn't look broken at all. But then he uses this appraisal ability with a horological focus, basically clock expertise, and inspects the mechanism, discovering that the inner gears warped and slipped out of place. He makes a mental note to warn the owners that this clock is air-powered and super fragile when moved. After checking everything out, he figures he can fix it by replacing a few parts. The craftsman gets to work, identifying exactly which parts are needed for the repair. He focuses on the task at hand, working at his desk with various tools spread around him. Suddenly, this ghost-like figure appears out of nowhere, checking on his condition. The craftsman looks completely exhausted, already worn down from work. The ghost tells him that the Cyclo Guild master wants to talk to him, and the craftsman just responds with this weary resignation. Meanwhile, the craftsman's actually thrilled about the repair job he just finished. He's going on about how it was the absolute best experience, explaining that he'd only ever seen an air clock in books before, but now he actually got to touch one in person. The ghost asks if he finished repairing the requested item and mentions that it's an air clock that moves its pendulum using only air pressure without oil. The ghost confirms that the craftsman's even verified its operation. The craftsman explains that this clock is fragile when it gets hit with vibration, so he'll keep it secured. He places a clock stop sign on the mechanism. Someone comments that the craftsman's really amazing when it comes to clocks. The ghost mentions that it was impossible for their people too, so they passed it on to Cyclo. Another voice adds that none of their in-house craftsmen could repair it, so they're counting on him. The craftsman responds with this weary laugh, saying this is all he can do right now. Then a title card appears, identifying him as the clock user. The scene shifts as the ghost asks what it was the guild master wanted to talk about. The craftsman simply states that this is the ability he was given. A large bearded man delivers some shocking news. He tells Shakiro Owen that he's fired. Shakiro reacts in total disbelief, asking why this is happening so suddenly and whether he did something wrong. The man states that of course Shakiro did something wrong, obviously, then yells that useless trash like Shakiro has no place in his guild. Shakiro protests that he's been contributing to the guild properly. The ghost chimes in, mentioning that just the other day Shakiro even repaired that antique clock at the royal palace. But the guild master continues his tirade. He declares that the work has already been entrusted to the guild's most promising artisan. An older craftsman speaks up, saying that someone like him with the skill dexterous is a better example. The guild master adds that his son can repair anything, but compared to that craftsman, Shakiro falls short. The guild master yells that Shakiro can only repair clocks and demands to know if Shakiro can do anything else. Shakiro tries to protest, but the guild master has had enough. He orders Shakiro to get out of the craftsman's guild at once. The ghost pleads for the guild master to reconsider, but the man refuses to hear any more arguing. Now standing outside the guild, Shakiro wonders what he should do now. He walks away from the building, his footsteps heavy, letting out a pained sound as he looks out over the capital city from a high vantage point. Shakiro reflects on his past. He thinks about how things were better back then, recalling that he's loved making things since he was a kid. Everyone was so happy with the magic tools he made. The first one who was happy was his mom. He remembers making a compact that showed the days whether when opened for a girl named Rain, who was always troubled by her laundry getting wet. His parents told him he was perfect for the job and hoped that in the future he'd marry their daughter and inherit the company. People called him a genius when they learned he made such things at only 6 years old. Those were the days when everything went smoothly. But then the gears started to go out of sync, and it all began from that day on. Hold up. Smash like and subscribe for more hidden manga gems. Now, I dare you to comment, I'm loving it. I bet most of you won't do it. Alright, let's continue. Meanwhile, 2 years ago, a young girl named Alice runs ahead in an elaborate dress, her twin tails bouncing as she calls out to her big brother to hurry up. Behind her, a light-haired boy named Shakiro warns her that if she runs that fast, Maria won't be able to catch up. The dark-haired girl Maria stubbornly declares she doesn't care and keeps pushing forward. Shakiro gets flustered and asks why Maria is bringing this up all of a sudden. Maria, now shown as an older version of herself surrounded by flowers, reminds him that she's his fiancée. She muses that if they had a daughter, she wonders if the kid would be like Alice. Shakiro stammers that their engagement was something their parents decided when they were 10. Alice turns to him and asks if he doesn't like her, but Shakiro quickly tries to clarify that's not what he meant. Maria giggles as both she and Alice grab his hands, urging him to come along, and someone cheers for Maria to do her best as Shakiro reacts with total confusion. The three of them stand before this grand Gothic cathedral. Alice is beaming with excitement about the skill selection ceremony coming up. The narration explains that when citizens turn 16 and reach adulthood, they've gotta take part in this ceremony. The scene is set in their home, the Kingdom of Heinberg, whose ornate crest is displayed. Inside the ceremony hall, crowds of people are gathered everywhere. Alice looks around in amazement at how many people there are. Maria notes that all the important people from guilds around the country have come too, and Shakiro adds that they can even recruit people on the spot. Before the ceremony begins, Shakiro encourages Maria to do her best. Alice announces she'll go first. The process gets explained. When someone offers a prayer before the crystal, words appear, and those words become the skill granted to them. A kid nearby receives the skill strongman and celebrates. Then a dramatic flash of light erupts as the ceremony proceeds. An older man stares in shock, stammering and sweating. Maria stands at the center with this stunned expression as the crowd erupts in murmurs. The announcement spreads through the hall that the saint has appeared. People repeat in disbelief that it's the saint. Alice turns to her big brother and asks if a saint is one of the most amazing occupational skills. Shakiro confirms it's a rare occupational skill that hasn't appeared in decades and congratulates Maria on the incredible result. The narration explains there are two types of skills: general skills and occupation skills. General skills grant one power per personality, while occupation skills allow multiple powers to manifest for one personality. The bottom section emphasizes that occupation skills are rare, and the law requires people to take up the job matching their skill. Examples are shown of people being assigned occupations regardless of their preferences. In this country, a skill isn't just a talent, it's someone's very destiny itself. Shakiro stands there thinking about how Maria became a saint, and honestly, he's pretty sure he could become one too. Alice turns to him and asks what they should do, wondering if her big brother wants to go first. But then the ghost familiar floats nearby and tells them to wait, saying it needs to prepare itself a bit more first before announcing it'll go first. Meanwhile, Shakiro and Maria stand together in the ceremony hall. Maria's face shows fierce determination as she thinks to herself that she won't lose to some saint. She steps forward and begins to pray before the crystal, and suddenly a dramatic burst of light erupts as the ceremony proceeds. Someone in the crowd reacts with shock at another incredible result. Then the crowd erupts into complete chaos. An old man laughs in delight while Alice stands at the center, announcing that she's a sage. The hall explodes with reactions as people repeat in disbelief that she said sage. Someone in the crowd wonders what the hell is going on with this year's ceremony and says they want a super rare skill too. Another person explains that being a sage is incredible, a top-tier skill from the mage or alchemist branches. Someone else asks if being a sage is really that great, and Alice herself just looks completely shocked at the result. Alice tells her big brother to do his best, and Maria calls out Shakiro's name. Shakiro declares that now it's his turn. He walks forward toward the crystal, saying a quiet plea and hoping he can gain a special skill that's just as amazing as theirs. The scene shifts to dramatic wide shots of the ceremony hall and the city outside as the crowd reacts with shock. Someone calls out for their big brother in surprise. Then the scene shifts to a strange dreamlike space filled with floating clock gears and mechanisms. Shakiro floats in this ethereal realm when suddenly a voice calls out to him, saying Cyclo equals Owen, answer me. The voice asks him why he wishes for a special power. Shakiro floats through this gear-filled space, and suddenly a memory flashes him with Alice and Maria together. Alice begins to say something, but the memory fades before she can finish. The question just hangs there in the air. Shakiro answers the voice, saying he wants to make his family and everyone happy. Meanwhile, someone reacts in complete shock at whatever's happening, declaring this is completely unprecedented. Then Shakiro suddenly realizes something: it was all a dream. He snaps back to reality and urgently asks what his skill actually was. The ceremony official begins to announce his skill, but Shakiro just stands there completely confused, never having heard of clock wielder before and wondering if it's even a job skill. The official explains it means one who deals with clocks. Someone nearby asks what that's supposed to be, and another person questions if anyone even knows about this skill. The official provides more context. According to the holy texts, when the god created the world and sang their song, a great clock tower was built. The term clock wielder refers precisely to the caretaker and overseer of that tower. Shakiro thinks it sounds pretty lame and feels disappointed since the crystal shone so brightly. But then the crowd erupts as someone declares that his skill has been confirmed for the first time in history. They emphasize that it's extremely rare, a unique skill, and it is indeed a job skill. The official dismisses him and calls for the next person to step forward. Someone in the crowd reacts in confusion at how abruptly it ended. Later, a narration box explains that Shakiro's reputation as a clockmaker was terrible. Maria's father, this well-dressed middle-aged man, stands with Maria and declares he can no longer give his daughter to just an ordinary clockmaker. The engagement between Shakiro and Maria was annulled. Maria's father apologizes, explaining that even the church is against them. Shakiro clenches his fist in frustration. Outside a building, someone tells Shakiro they're truly sorry, but it can't be helped since Maria is now a saint. Shakiro thinks to himself that this doesn't mean he's given up. In a memory, young Maria tells young Shakiro that if that happens, she'll definitely come for him. Shakiro declares he'll become a splendid clockmaker, one respected by everyone in the world. Maria tells him she'll be waiting, she responds that she will. Then the scene moves over to Shakiro's family seeing Alice off. One of the parents tells her to take care. Shakiro reassures Alice that if she ever has any trouble, she can always talk to him. Alice says goodbye to her mom and big brother. The narration explains that Alice got scouted by the Adventurers Guild and is on the fast track now. Shakiro resolves to work hard so he doesn't lose to Alice or Maria. But then the scene shows Alice clinging to Shakiro's back, both of them struggling. Alice insists she doesn't need help and that she's totally fine on her own. Shakiro responds uncertainly. Later, someone tells Shakiro he's got a position at the Craftsman's Guild too. Shakiro confirms he starts work tomorrow. The scene shifts to the guild master telling Shakiro he's hiring him because the law says he has to, but warns him not to dare slack off. A text box notes that his employers hated him, commenting on the clock user skill. Meanwhile, someone tells Shakiro they'll be asking for his help again. The narration notes there were even people who praised his work. Back at home, Shakiro's mother announces that tonight's dinner is his favorite, meat pie. The ghost familiar comments that if only Shakiro weren't a clock user, he could have become a magic tool engineer everyone admired. The ghost adds that it's a real shame. Shakiro tells himself to stop, that it's pointless to talk about what-ifs. Then an explanation of the clock user skill lays out its full capabilities. Shakiro can create any clock he knows, though they disappear after some time. He can tell the condition of a clock even without seeing it directly. His sense ability can detect the location of anyone possessing a clock. He can store clock parts in a different dimension and retrieve them anytime. The stop ability stops clocks regardless of whether they have power or not. The skill literally allows him to do anything related to clocks, but that's all it does. Maria and Alice, who had been beside him until now, have gone on ahead. Shakiro stands alone before a massive array of interlocking clock gears, realizing he's the only one unable to move forward. Shakiro walks through the rain, soaked and alone. The narration reflects on how things might have been different if not for being a clock user. From that day until today, the one who believed in him more than anyone else was himself. Meanwhile, on the street, people are gossiping about a serial rapist on the loose. Someone asks if anyone heard about it. Another person comments that it's scary and questions what the police are even doing. Shakiro overhears the conversation as he walks past. Someone nearby mutters about a serial rapist, wondering what's so fun about doing something like that. Shakiro dismisses the chatter and continues on, eventually arriving home and announcing his return. Miranda, Shakiro's next-door neighbor, welcomes him home from her shop, and right away she notices he's completely soaked. She insists on washing his clothes for him, telling him to hurry up and take them off. Shakiro protests that it's okay and he can handle it himself, but Miranda's already handing him something hot, warning him to be careful. Shakiro thanks her. Now Miranda's been his next-door neighbor for as long as he can remember. She's always been kind to him and his sister Alice since they were little. Lately she's been taking care of him in place of his mom, who actually ran away from home after falling in love. There's even this old memory of young Miranda playing with them as kids, chasing after them through the streets. Back in the present, Miranda asks if he got into a fight with someone from the guild. Then she shows him a clock part she found at the tool shop, noting it's a perfect fit for something. Shakiro hesitates, thinking it's not really that, but he trails off. Miranda simply tells him it's okay, no need to explain. Miranda smiles warmly and tells Shakiro she's sure there's something only he can do. There's this close-up of her eyes, and the crazy part is there's intricate clockwork visible within them, like actual gears and mechanisms. Her hands delicately hold a pocket watch as she says this. Back in the shop, Miranda takes a sip of tea and comments that the herbal tea tastes a bit salty. Shakiro just responds absently, clearly distracted. Later, Shakiro's looking at a plant on a bookshelf, checking if this is everything Miranda asked him to take care of. Thanks to her, he's been able to feel a little more positive about everything. First, though, he needs to think about how he can actually return to work. Walking through the town streets, Shakiro considers maybe asking a regular customer for some information, though most customers can't even get through the guild gate without an introduction letter anyway. Suddenly, a large boot appears in his path and someone calls out to their big bro, asking what kind of person they're doing it with today. Shakiro immediately activates his clock sensibility and detects two people near the stairs. The realization hits him hard. This connects to the case the townspeople were talking about yesterday. Meanwhile, the hooded criminals are discussing their target, a little pharmacy sitting right in the middle of a residential district. They plan to break in there and rape the woman who owns the shop. One of them confirms they're used to this kind of thing and tells the others to leave it to them. Another asks if they just clear the area of people like usual. The one in charge confirms they've been paid plenty and warns them not to screw it up. Shakiro overhears everything, and honestly he just thinks it's disgusting. Word around town is that Miranda, the owner of the Miranda pharmacy, is quite the beauty. Shakiro realizes with horror that big sis Miranda is being targeted, and he wants to punch these guys lights out right then and there, but he stops himself, trying to get a hold of his emotion. Meanwhile, one of the criminals mentions that if they make a scene in a residential area, people are bound to come running. But the other one reassures him that there are plenty of ways to shut them up. Suddenly, a dark figure steps out and reveals he's a constable. Someone asks what he just said, the criminals panic, wondering who the hell's there. The mention of a man who protects the capital's peace throws them into total confusion, freaking out and unable to think straight about what to do. The constable smiles and casually asks what the matter is. One of the criminals stammers that they were right here talking, just talking. The constable asks if they were talking, and the criminal confirms, saying he was in the middle of questioning someone, asking if there's a problem. Then the constable notes that there aren't many people wandering around at this hour, for example someone like the person he's speaking to. Meanwhile on the rooftops, the boss tells his subordinate not to bother chasing. One of the criminals thinks that kid was the one from the shop and he might actually be useful. Later at the police station, Miranda desperately pleads for them to believe her. A police officer suggests she might have mistaken the person for someone else, but Miranda insists that can't be right because she's certain he said himself he was a policeman. The officer says he'll make a note of it just in case, then asks what happened after that. Then the police officer asks Shakiro what his occupation is. Shakiro stammers nervously, trying to find the right words. He finally admits he's unemployed. The officer confirms this, and the two men stare at each other with clear tension hanging in the air. The officer explains that someone with a job skill being unemployed is normally impossible unless they have serious personal issues. Shakiro quickly explains that he was working at the Craftsmen's Guild, but was suddenly fired. Inside his head, panic sets in as he realizes how suspicious he must look now at his age. For someone with a job skill to be jobless is basically unheard of. The officer considers this information carefully, saying he'll stay cautious just in case, though he seems slightly less suspicious now. Shakiro lets out a frustrated sigh after leaving the police station. They don't trust him at all. He looks up at the sky and realizes he'll have to handle this situation alone after all, his expression hardening with determination. He'll stop their plan himself. The strategy forms in his mind: ambush them, catch them, then shout to gather people. That's the only way this will work. Outside, dramatic speed lines emphasize the building as he steels himself with the thought that even without a job, he still has courage. Then Shakiro detects the presence of a watch using his ability. There's no doubt about it. It's that guy from the alley. Suddenly, the criminal lunges from the shadows with a wild yell, knife in hand. Meanwhile, the corrupt constable is shown climbing the stairs nearby, and the attack happens fast, the criminal charging at Shakiro with violent intent. The criminal violently grabs Shakiro, restraining him in a brutal hold. Shakiro screams out for help, begging for someone to come to his aid. Inside one of the nearby houses, a voice asks what's happening at this hour. The criminal tells someone that daddy's going to check it out, so they shouldn't go outside, then says they just need to show this guy to the neighbors. The plan is coming together exactly as the criminals intended. Miranda appears at her doorway, asking if something is wrong. The criminal immediately starts yelling for someone to call the other officers, claiming that Shakiro is the serial rapist. He commands Shakiro to stay still as the violent struggle continues, and Shakiro's face shows complete shock and horror at how the situation has twisted against him. Miranda stares in disbelief, recognizing the person being restrained. She can barely process what she's seeing as she realizes it's Cyclo. The criminal keeps his grip tight on Shakiro, announcing that staying on stakeout around here really paid off, and he's not letting him get away now. Down on the street, neighbors begin gathering to see what the commotion is about. Shakiro's mind races with desperation as he realizes he's been completely set up. He can't even speak properly to defend himself. He tries reaching out to Miranda, attempting to tell her it's not what she thinks. Shakiro's thoughts echo as the situation closes in on him. Within the reach of his own hands is enough, if only he could make everyone happy. That's what he thought. The image of interconnected gears appears, symbolizing the clockwork world he's been trapped in, each gear turning in sync with the distorted reality around him. Meanwhile, Miranda stares at him, her expression betraying doubt. In Shakiro's mind, he sees the accusing faces. A voice tells him it's a lie. Another woman says he would do something like that. Then the dark-haired woman, Maria, appears in his memory saying he's the worst. Shakiro desperately screams that he didn't do anything and begs them to believe him. But the verdict comes down hard. Defendant Shakiro Owen is sentenced to exile on the frontier as a criminal slave. Shakiro's face shows complete devastation, the weight of the false accusation crushing him. This is a tale woven by gears. The narration declares that the kid, who had been nothing more than one of the gears making up a distorted world, will one day become a hero who changes the very nature of the world itself. Shakiro stands before grand mechanical architecture, his clock-marked eye gleaming with future potential. The caption reads, "Kill the Deus ex machina, the god made of machinery." Inside the courtroom, the judges sit at their bench, ready to pass judgment. They announce they'll begin the trial, starting with the defendant Sikro Owen. Within the malice of the setup, Shakiro sits in chains, drenched in sweat. He yells that this is a mistake and that he didn't do anything. He insists there shouldn't be any evidence that he's the culprit. The narration explains that deemed useless, the clock user was rejected and cast out from the Craftsman's Guild, but in the depths of the dungeon, he awakens to his true power. The judge strokes his chin thoughtfully, noting that the defendant claims this. Officer Bujin Bajek gets introduced as the one testifying. Shakiro's eyes go wide with shock and rage as he sees the corrupt constable standing there in uniform. He can't believe it and demands to know why that guy is here. Then Shakiro loses his composure completely, screaming from the floor that they shouldn't mess with him, that the officer is the real culprit. The court official immediately orders the defendant to be silent in the court. Meanwhile, Officer Bajak delivers his fabricated testimony with calm authority, claiming that Cyclo Owen paid off the local thugs to clear the area and repeatedly committed acts of sexual assault against women. That's what their investigation uncovered, he says. Reactions flood the courtroom as Shakiro stammers in disbelief, asking what Bajak is trying to do and whether he's trying to pin the crime on him. A bystander comments on what a scumbag Shakiro must be, while a female officer mentions that her colleague was a victim too. Meanwhile, Miranda watches from the gallery, her face filled with sorrow as she quietly says Shakiro's name. The scene widens to show the packed courtroom. Someone notes there are far too many spectators for a summary trial. Another voice observes that they're all connected to the women who were victimized, and the crowd of female spectators fills the benches, their eyes fixed on the accused. Bajak continues, stating they also have a witness and asks them to come forward. Shakiro tries to protest, his voice cracking as he demands to know how they can accuse him of such a serious offense. Then the courtroom doors open and two figures make their entrance. Lady Maria Florence appears in full saint attire, accompanied by an armored hero. Someone announces that the hero is with them too, while another voice declares that the saint is here. The crowd erupts in reaction as someone asks what those two are doing in a place like this. Another person notes that these are the two who protect the royal capital. Shakiro's eyes go wide in complete shock. The guy can't believe what he's seeing and asks why Maria is on their side. His voice cracks as he calls out her name. While the courtroom scene shows Maria standing among the spectators and officials, the building exterior looming over everything. Meanwhile, the hero places a reassuring hand on Maria's shoulder and tells her it's okay, that he's right here. He encourages her to go and testify to the truth, and Maria nods, her voice determined as she says she'll do her best. Then the crowd buzzes with excitement. Someone announces this is the saint's testimony. Another spectator mentions they heard a rumor the hero and saint might be getting married soon, while someone else comments that as expected of the hero and saint, they make a perfect pair. Maria steps forward and begins her testimony, stating that Shakiro is her former fiancé. She explains that they sent money along with letters because life must be hard with just the timekeeper's skill. But Shakiro's face shows total confusion. The guy can't even process what she just said. Shakiro screams that it's all lies, he never received any money or letters, nothing. Meanwhile, someone in the crowd mutters that the guy's just too stubborn for his own good. Another voice chimes in, saying there's no reason anyone would make something like that up. Then a church official speaks up calmly, stating that the church has records of the money transfer related to this whole mess. Someone else demands to know what they're even talking about regarding some letter and remittance. The judge calls for order in the court. One of the officials tells Shakiro to see for himself. Suddenly, a mysterious figure comments that they didn't know what Shakiro was planning to do afterward. Then the thug from earlier appears and laughs, confirming that Brother Sikro did pay him to clear people out of the area. An official announces that the defendant's accomplice is also present. Shakiro desperately protests that he doesn't even know that man, he really didn't do anything. He begs them to believe him. But Maria looks at him with disappointment and says she had hoped he would just admit his crime and show some remorse. Her voice turns cold as she asks if he's now calling the church and her liars too. Maria's expression becomes completely detached. She looks down at Shakiro with cold eyes and tells him he's the worst cyclo. The scene shifts to show Maria in softer lighting, her face gentle as she calls out his name, telling him she'll be waiting. Meanwhile, Shakiro sits in darkness, completely unable to respond. Then someone from the crowd screams at Shakiro, calling him a vile man trampling on Maria's kindness. Another voice shouts for him not to come any closer, and someone else asks why he would even do this. Shakiro's face appears in close-up, tears forming as he whispers Maria's name. Suddenly, the guards tackle Shakiro to the ground. He struggles against them, screaming and asking why they won't believe him. He begs them to understand, saying he's not the kind of person who would do something like that. He calls out desperately for Miranda to testify on his behalf, his voice breaking as he tries to call her name. The scene closes in on Shakiro's devastated face. Miranda stands in the background with her hand covering her face, looking away from him. Then a realization hits. The text declares, "Ah, I see." The narration coldly asks who would listen to someone with a crappy skill anyway. Meanwhile, the court official announces the defendant Shakiro Owen, the clock user. The scene shows silhouettes labeled as guards, saint, and hero surrounding him. The judge pronounces the verdict, sentencing him to exile in the frontier. The text drives home the point that nobody trusts or believes him. Suddenly, someone asks what he just said. In a dark prison cell, a figure whispers something barely audible. A voice from the shadows thanks someone for taking their place. Then Shakiro's face fills the panel, his clockwork eye gleaming with murderous intent. He vows that he'll definitely get them and send them straight to hell. The scene shifts to the guards locking him away. One guard orders the others to lock him in the cell, another responds affirmatively. But then a third guard taunts Shakiro, telling him to go ahead and try, calling him Cyclo the serial rapist. Meanwhile, the official in the black suit tells the ladies he'll see them later, mentioning he has some matters to discuss regarding the prisoner transfer procedures. The hero stands nearby with Maria, responding humbly that he only did what was expected of a hero. The women around them gush about how cool the hero was, excited that even the hero himself came. Someone reflects that things never went this smoothly. The bottom panel shows hero Lord Raven is revealed to be the Duke of House Crowheart, while Officer Lord Bugen is the Viscount of House Bajek. The narration notes that truly both of them embody the saying skills reflect the person. Inside an elegant room, the hero asks Bugen how he managed to get the saint to give that kind of testimony. Bugen casually explains that Maria's testimony was simply the truth. An inset panel shows someone mentioning that Cyclo Owen was a nuisance to them too. The conversation continues as Bugen reveals the setup. He explains that anyway, thanks to the hero, they were able to get rid of Cyclo Owen, though it seems Maria didn't know the church guy was embezzling and burning the letters. The scene shifts to show Maria being held, with Bugen saying all that's left is for him to comfort the heartbroken Maria. Then Bugen addresses the hero, calling him a wicked duke. The hero responds in kind, addressing Bugen as officer of the Bajak Viscount family. The two men laugh together, their faces twisted with cruel satisfaction. The hero comments that in a world like this, someone would go crazy if they didn't just keep screwing women left and right. Bugen agrees, saying exactly. They toast to their victory, agreeing to keep having fun together as winners from here on out. The scene shifts to show a covered wagon rolling across barren ground, and inside a dark prison cell, a figure sits in silence. The scene introduces a foreboding location. The text explains that the worst dungeon called Deep Hole lies to the north of the kingdom of Heinberg, and not a single person has ever reached its deepest level. The entrance to the dungeon is shown, overgrown with vegetation and ancient stone. Meanwhile, above, Shakiro sits chained and bound, being transported to his exile. The narration explains that adventurers slay the vicious monsters that emerge from the dungeon, and facilities and industries have been built to support them. The scene shows adventurers in combat against monstrous creatures. But here's the thing, it's precisely thanks to the blessings of the dungeon that this place has developed. The landscape spreads out below, showing a fortified settlement surrounded by walls. A heraldic emblem appears on screen, displaying the crest of the region. This is the northern frontier of North Foria. The scene opens on the northern frontier town of North Foria, where European-style buildings with timber framing line the streets and the settlements bustling with activity around a central plaza. Guards escort a chained Shakiro through the crowded square, one of them barking at him to move it. Meanwhile, a woman standing nearby holds a letter and notices the procession passing through. She remarks that she's seeing a face she hasn't seen before. Down in the plaza, the guards present Shakiro to the local authorities, and someone identifies him as the criminal slave Cyclo Owen, asking if he's the replacement porter sent from the capital. Then a massive man with an eye patch introduces himself. His name is Guanoyej, and he's the master of this adventurers guild. The guy's built like a tank, wearing ornate armor decorated with crosses and chains. Guanoyej tells Shakiro that he's heard rumors about him from the great sage's younger sister. Shakiro's eyes widen with a flicker of hope. He remembers Alice and thinks maybe, just maybe, being related to her will get him better treatment here. But Guanoyej crushes that hope immediately, saying Alice told him that her brother is a hopeless incompetent. Shakiro weakly tries to deny it, saying that's not true. But Guanoyej responds flatly that it's no lie, the great sage himself has said it countless times. Then someone else nearby confirms they heard it too. The image shifts to show Alice's face through prison bars, but this time her expression is twisted with cruelty and malice, her eyes cold and merciless. Shakiro's mind reels with the question of why Alice would do this to him. Alice's voice echoes in his memory, declaring she has no mercy to spare for scum like him. She'll work him to the bone as her slave until he dies. Then the abuse begins in earnest. Adventurers mock Shakiro's clock user ability, calling it totally worthless. Someone comments that he's pretty scrawny for a pack mule. They force him to carry heavy loads and do grueling labor, and when he slows down, they kick him and yell at him not to dare tire out. One adventurer observes that he's seriously useless. Another demands to know what's with his weak responses, telling him to hurry it up. Someone mentions that killing him would be troublesome. Shakiro collapses repeatedly. His meals consist of scraps thrown into bowls on the ground like he's an animal. At the end of each brutal day, he's locked back in his cell, lying broken on the floor. The mistreatment continues as they travel. Guards order Shakiro to walk faster, calling him too slow. Shakiro can barely respond beyond a weak affirmation. Meanwhile, other travelers comment that he's become a dull fellow, wondering if he's one of those guys who only says yeah to everything lately. Shakiro's face shows complete exhaustion and resignation. The guy looks absolutely done. His internal thoughts reveal pure despair, and he's pretty much certain he's gonna end up dying like a rag in this place. Meanwhile, the guards completely misinterpret his silence, asking if he just thought of something clever. One of them snarls that his attitude pisses them off, calling him a useless idiot. But Shakiro just thinks to himself that he doesn't even care anymore. Then they arrive at their destination. Before them yawns the entrance to the abyss of the deep hole, this massive circular pit descending straight into darkness. The narration identifies this as the entrance to the notorious dungeon. One of the A-rank adventurers clicks his tongue in irritation, telling Shakiro that they went through all the trouble of bringing him out here. Shakiro looks down into the darkness, and his thoughts turn to death, wondering if he could at least die peacefully. But the adventurer barks that Shakiro might as well just die down there, calling him useless. Another one comments on his weak reaction. Then someone kicks or shoves him forward, shouting at him to take a good look. Suddenly Shakiro struggles desperately against the adventurer's grip, screaming at them to let go of him. He can't die in a place like this. One of them responds that it's not time yet. Another asks what's going on all of a sudden and tells him to stop struggling. As Shakiro fights back, a memory flashes through his mind. Lord Raven's face appears, twisted in this manic, cruel expression. The realization hits Shakiro fully now. This was Lord Raven's plan all along, to make Shakiro take the blame for his crime and die for him. A close-up of a mechanical clock eye punctuates the moment of understanding. The adventurers shove Shakiro over the edge. His body gets thrown backward into the abyss of the deep hole. He tumbles through the darkness, while the figures above watch him fall into the pit below. Then Shakiro lies collapsed on rocky ground at the bottom, his body sprawled across jagged stones in the darkness of the dungeon depths. He groans weakly as the cave walls tower around him, showing just how far he's fallen. A close-up of his exhausted, pained face shows he's barely conscious. Suddenly, Shakiro's eyes open. He stares up at the cave ceiling above him, seeing the dark opening and glowing eyes of some creature peering from the shadows. His hand moves, the realization hits him that he's still breathing, that he survived the fall. An unbelievable miracle. Lying there in the darkness, Shakiro reflects on how strange it is that when someone's about to die, they suddenly want to live. Even though he thought he didn't care anymore, the survival instinct kicked in. He wonders if his fall slowed down because he got caught in some web-like thing on the way down. Being light and having been unconscious were lucky breaks in this mess. Somehow he survived. Now he decides to get a grasp of the situation. Activating his clock generation ability, he assesses what he has. Shakiro takes stock of his situation. The only thing left to worry about now are monsters. He checks his inventory through his ability and finds no food in his supplies, just a knife and a bottle. Looking at his internal clock, he realizes it's been more than half a day since he fell, which means rescue probably isn't coming. Then he finds a water source and examines it. The water looks drinkable, thank goodness. He'll have to move carefully though. Looking around at the unexplored cave system, he starts wondering if this could be an unexplored layer of the deep hole dungeon. But suddenly, a massive monster appears from the darkness. Shakiro barely has time to process what he's seeing before his instincts scream at him to run, and he scrambles to get away as the creature lunges toward him. The massive monster crashes down toward Shakiro from above. It's an absolute unit covered in thick armor plating with chains wrapped around its body. The thing is enormous, easily dwarfing Shakiro, who stares up at it from below. This is what's been hunting in the deeper levels of the dungeon. Shakiro watches in horror as the creature moves, and he realizes what the hell that thing is. It's been eating monsters way bigger than him. He needs to get away before it finds him, but his chain weapon just dangles uselessly as he starts backing away from the nightmarish predator. Shakiro screams and runs for his life. Pure panic takes over as he scrambles through the cave passages. Everything about the situation is bad and he knows it. his terrified voice echoing through the darkness as he desperately tries to put distance between himself and that monster. Breathing hard, Shakiro stops to catch his breath. That was close. Looking back, he realizes those wriggling things from the monster can't reach this far. Then he spots something ahead, light breaking through the cave. They did it, there's a way to get outside. But the relief dies immediately. Even with the light visible, there's no way he could actually reach it. The path is blocked or too dangerous. Either way he goes, it's death. The guy's trapped between the monster behind him and an impossible escape ahead. 5 days pass since then. Shakiro sits slumped against the cave wall, staring at his clock mechanism while slowly wasting away. The monster waits patiently in the darkness, like it's maturing its favorite ham or something. Shakiro's stomach growls painfully. He thinks about the last time he ate a proper meal, wants to eat his mom's homemade meat pie. He's gotten so much thinner, barely holding on. Suddenly a voice calls out asking if it's hard, calling him big brother, noting how thin he's become. The hallucinations start kicking in. Shakiro hears Alice and Maria calling out to him from this bright place, telling him to come over here. Maria's voice says he doesn't have to suffer anymore, and Shakiro weakly responds that he's coming. But then the vision twists into something way darker. This sinister version appears, declaring that the useless deserve to die. Suddenly Shakiro's eye snaps into focus, and he violently pulls himself back from the edge. That was way too close. The guy almost jumped while still seeing the illusion. The starvation and desperation are seriously messing with his head, making him see things that could straight up get him killed. Then a vision of Miranda appears, her face all sad as she apologizes. Shakiro reacts with wide eyes and his mouth hanging open, complete shock written across his face. Clock mechanisms shatter violently, crystalline shards flying everywhere as the hallucination breaks apart around him. The scene shifts back to reality. Shakiro slumps against the cave wall, completely exhausted. The monster makes these muffled sounds somewhere in the darkness, heavy breathing echoing through the cave. Meanwhile, this long tentacle-like appendage stretches across the rough cave floor below. Shakiro kneels on the ground, staring down at the dark appendage on the cave floor. Then the realization hits him, this one is him. The tentacle is somehow part of him now, or connected to him somehow. Shakiro's mind flashes back to everyone who threw him away, the conspirators and authority figures who betrayed him all sitting together, looking smug as hell. The cruel logic echoes in his head. People like him just don't have a way to protect themselves, and when they become a burden, they're cast aside. Then the memories flood back even harder. Voices mock what a clock user even is, pointing out how his little sister is a sage and his childhood friend is a saint. Maria's father yells that his daughter would never be a match for some clock user like Shakiro. The large, bald man from the trial screams they have no need for an incompetent like him. Someone sneers at him to go ahead and try, Cyclo the serial rapist. Another voice calls him a vile fiend trampling on Maria's goodwill. A woman says he's the worst, and the words just keep repeating in his head over and over. Suddenly Shakiro's face fills the panel, his expression twisted with pure rage and determination. His clock mechanism eye is fully visible and burning with intensity. He thinks about all those who disgraced him and swears he won't forgive them. He'll survive no matter what it takes. Then a massive burst of light erupts from the deep hole where Shakiro was thrown. The energy is so intense it can be seen from the surface above, and Shakiro refuses to die in a place like this. Meanwhile, the guards on the surface notice the strange light coming from the direction of the deep hole. One of them panics, asking what that light is, and another confirms it's coming from the deep hole. A guard orders them to report to the Lord at once, but Shakiro's defiant voice seems to echo his refusal. Like hell, he'll die here. Back in the cave, Shakiro stares at his hands in total confusion. Clock mechanisms start materializing all around him, glowing with energy and just floating there in the air. He's trying to process what the hell just happened, like the light he was holding in his hand was definitely something, but he doesn't understand what yet. Meanwhile, Shakiro's still staring at his hands in shock, trying to piece it all together. Then he thinks back to the lizard he just ate, and suddenly the realization hits. If that clock had stopped ringing the exact moment he ate it, something major definitely went down. The dramatic revelation unfolds. Hara Dokai, the stomach clock ability. A massive burst of light erupts as Shakiro realizes the hunger is completely gone, and even his hand wound has straight up disappeared. The power basically reverted his body back to when it was in good nutritional condition. Clock manipulation has activated, and the transformation is complete. Then time stop activates. The command echoes through the cave as massive clock imagery manifests all around him. Shakiro's energy and stamina are overflowing now, exactly as he thought they would. He realizes the full implications. If he locks himself in this state, he can survive on just water alone. The power is absolutely insane, and he knows this changes everything for his survival. Now Shakiro sets his objective: defeat the monster blocking the exit. The creature looms in the darkness as massive magical clock formations spread across the cave floor and the space around them. Elaborate circular patterns and gears materialize as Shakiro's power manifests. With his new abilities stabilized, he realizes they have plenty of time to figure out an escape plan. The narrator explains that Shakiro, deemed useless as a clock user, was rejected and cast out from the Craftsman's Guild, but in the depths of the dungeon, he's awakened to his true power. Meanwhile, Shakiro's mind races as he pieces together the mechanics of his awakening. Until now, his skill could only be used on mechanical clocks. He looks at the hourglass materializing before him and realizes something crucial. The range of the clock user skill is expanding. The more a skill is used, the higher its proficiency becomes. Various types of clocks flash through his understanding: water clocks, hourglasses, sundials. His clock eye burns with intensity as the full potential dawns on him. If he could control anything with the word clock in its name, the possibilities would be absolutely limitless. Training begins immediately, and Shakiro starts by fully understanding the structure of each clock type. First, he works on creating the water clock and the sand clock, sending magic power into the water and sand to control them directly. In clock creation, he removes the concept of a container altogether, just letting the materials float and function freely. Next, he creates the sundial, pouring his life energy into it to form what he calls the solar sphere. The sundial manifests, but he notices this size is his current limit. If he wants to make the sundial itself larger, he'll have to strengthen his own body as well. Time passes as he builds up his stamina methodically, and a full month goes by dedicated to this intense training regimen. Shakiro pushes himself harder, surrounded by clock generation effects. Various clock mechanisms and tools materialize around him in rapid succession as he practices. Suddenly, the monster's claw strikes toward him from the darkness. Shakiro pushes himself internally, not yet, focus the mind more, just like that. Speed lines blur around him as he concentrates with maximum intensity. Then he releases the command, and time stop activates with full force. Time stop releases and the training breakthrough happen. Various clock forms manifest in brilliant light: water clocks, hourglasses, sundials, all floating in the magical space around Shakiro. He's done it, the first step is complete. Shakiro sits in the cave, catching his breath and thinking about what comes next. Now he'll apply this in battle. Shakiro explains his research methodology. He narrowed his subjects down to hourglasses, water clocks, and sundials, studying the shadow cast around the stick used to make shadows by manipulating the light source. The shadow falls and he realizes he doesn't fully understand it yet, but he's mastered 10 water clocks. He verified everything, took detailed notes, and made the techniques his own. He tests the sensing ability and sees the shadow forming. When there are obstacles, the accuracy of clock sensing drops. But then something else kicks in, a substitute for an eye using the water clock detection. This feeling reminds him of being a kid again, back when he was still learning his craft. But the difference from back then is crystal clear: revenge. The word hangs heavy in the darkness, and Shakiro's motivation has crystallized into a single purpose. Shakiro trains intensely, surrounded by numbered practice positions, determined to keep improving this skill to show those guys what he's capable of. 2 months have already passed since he started researching this ability. The results? Absolutely staggering. Massive geometric magic formations spread around him as he reviews everything he's accomplished: sundial and orichalcum sword generation complete, light generation in just 0.1 seconds, long-range monster subjugation with light in 3 seconds, ultra-high-speed light firing complete. Then there's shadow fixation to restrain monsters for 10 minutes. Detection, appraisal, and control range extended all the way to 50 meters. Shield maintenance lasting a full hour, water freezing speed complete in 0.1 second. He's also mastered long-range launches and K-type spear generation, expanded his water clock abilities beyond his body, orichalcum shield generation in 0.1 seconds, generated water for long-range generation up to 50 ulux or more, object blast by water pressure complete, and even mine generation from frogs and monsters. Both clock sense and clock generation have evolved to incredible levels. All that's left now is to defeat that guy, and honestly, it really does feel satisfying seeing how far he's come. Through all this training, the range of exploration via the sundial and sensing via the water clock has expanded dramatically. Right now, Shakiro can sense the entire floor area, and the place is absolutely full of monsters scattered throughout. Clock generation activates, and he pushes further. Clock sense combines with the water clock ability to detect living beings. It's a combination of the original clock sensing and water clock detection, meaning he can sense living beings by detecting the liquid flowing inside their bodies. Meanwhile, this light sphere he's created is an application of a sundial that senses the shadows created by light. This means that even from a distance, Shakiro can know exactly where everything is. As if holding it in his hand, the level of precision and awareness is unlike anything possible before. But then he notices the monster is right there in front of the exit, and Shakiro picks up on something odd: is it sharpening its claws? Suddenly the creature lunges. The massive skeletal beast tears through the cave with terrifying speed, and Shakiro can't believe this is happening. His detection skills scream warnings as the monster closes the distance, the claw reaching for him with impossible speed. The full horror of the situation hits Shakiro as the monster attacks with devastating force, because for these 3 months, the creature wasn't just waiting around. It was working on something. Shakiro processes what's happening as debris falls around them, and then the realization strikes him hard. The monster has been chipping away at the rock little by little so he wouldn't notice. All this time while Shakiro trained and grew stronger, the beast was executing its own plan, slowly and methodically breaking through the barrier between them. Shakiro's legs are shaking, but he pushes through it, telling himself he'll take the monster down right here. The technique name escapes his lips, Tokse Toki Names, but the chains wrap around him mid-attack and he barely avoids serious damage. If it weren't for the collar protecting him, he'd be in real trouble. Clock generation activates, and first things first, he needs to do something about the monster's eyes. Shakiro fires an application of the hourglass technique, rapidly generating only the sand and launching it at high speed. The sand pelts the monster's face in a devastating barrage, and he realizes he actually pulled it off. But then he looks at the monster's eye more carefully, and his confidence wavers. Did that actually work? The monster retaliates with explosive force, sending Shakiro flying through the cave. The sheer power of the counterattack catches him completely off guard, and he realizes his plan is totally backfiring as the impact tears through the area with devastating effect. Meanwhile, the hole by the cliff that was their potential escape route gets sealed shut by the destruction. Shakiro stares at the sealed exit, and the reality of their situation hits him hard. This is a hopeless situation, and he wonders if this is really the end for them. The monster's attacks suddenly stop, and Shakiro realizes the creature has lost sight of him in the darkness. In that case, he'll use his advantage. Clock sense activates, and his perception explodes outward, the monster's position becoming crystal clear to him now. He can see it perfectly through his ability, so it's time to strike it down. Shakiro launches his devastating counterattack. The strike lands with overwhelming force, chains shattering as the monster takes the full impact of his clock user ability. It's a brutal, decisive blow. The attack lands with devastating force, the impact shattering through the cave as Shakiro's clock generation technique tears into the monster. It's a complete success. Shakiro stands there breathing hard, his clock eye still active as he explains what just happened. The sundial's application works by instantly generating a sharp-bladed hand that slices straight through the enemy. It's one part of the sundial technique. He looks at the fallen monster and asks if they actually got him. Clock sense activates and the analysis comes back clear. Body fluid flow has stopped completely, vital signs are at zero. Shakiro's clock eyes widen as the reality hits him. He actually did it, he defeated the monster. Him, the guy everyone wrote off. Something else is happening now though. Turns out clock user wasn't such a useless skill after all. Suddenly Shakiro feels something strange coursing through him, this hot energy surging through his entire body, and he has no idea what's going on. Then it clicks. This is what adventurers call a level up, the ultimate potential unlocked. See, when someone kills monsters, they absorb the creature's souls and magic, pushing human abilities way beyond the realm of mortals. That's basically how leveling up works. The monster's remains crumble into dust behind him as Shakiro pieces it all together. His level went up because he beat that thing, which means, in other words, the more monsters he takes down, the stronger he gets. A smile spreads across his face as he realizes what this means. The more he kills, the closer his revenge begins. The gears of fate that had stopped are finally turning again. Shakiro just stands there with his clock eye blazing, surrounded by the imagery of countless gears and timepieces spinning around him. Now is the time to rise again, time to set everything in motion. Shakiro activates clock generation and charges forward with his clock eye blazing bright. First things first, he'll start by killing these bastards. The chain monster lunges at him from above, but Shakiro calls out his technique, an application of the water clock. He'll shred them with high-speed water blades using suijin. The water-based clock technique manifests as these razor-sharp projectiles that tear through the air straight toward his target. The monster tries to strike back, but Shakiro easily reads the incoming attacks. The guy can see their movements way clearer than before, probably because he leveled up. The creature is too slow, way too slow. Shakiro dodges effortlessly and counters with clock generation, wrapping chains around the monster as he maneuvers into position. Meanwhile, Shakiro keeps explaining his newfound abilities as he fights. The clock creation skill can generate not only whole clocks but also parts in any desired shape. He can make anything as long as it's a material he knows, even using the finest metals. Application to sundials creates bladed weapons like swords, while application to water clocks creates shields for defense. The versatility is incredible. Then the sharpness of the orichalcum metal comes into play. Shakiro brings down his generated blade with full force and yells for the monster to take this. The attack cuts through with devastating power, the premium metal giving his weapon an edge nothing in this dungeon can withstand. Clock generation pierces through the monster and it starts crumbling. Shakiro uses clock sense to confirm the kill. The magic power keeps pouring into him and he feels it immediately, another level up. The defeated monster dissolves into nothing as Shakiro stands victorious, absorbing its strength and growing even more powerful. Shakiro stands over the destroyed skeletal monster, processing what just happened. He sees the massive chained creature and realizes something, so this guy was the boss around here. The skeletal boss monster launches itself at Shakiro with terrifying speed, horns aimed directly at him. Shakiro activates clock generation and engages in direct combat, dodging and weaving through the creature's attacks, while countering with his generated chains and weapon. The boss monster defends itself by weaving its tentacles into a protective net. Shakiro observes the defensive pattern, noting that it guarded itself by creating that barrier. This one seems smarter than the others he's fought. He calls out clock generation again as the massive tentacle net spreads across the dungeon floor. Then the monster shifts tactics and starts digging its tentacles deep into the ground. Shakiro realizes what's happening and wonders what the hell that thing is doing. The situation looks bad. His deployed water clock shield starts cracking under the pressure and won't hold much longer. He calls out for help, sounding desperate as the underground assault intensifies. But suddenly Shakiro's panicked expression shifts to a confident smirk. Just kidding. He activates clock generation and creates a massive water clock that erupts outward in a devastating explosion, tearing through the ground and everything around it. The monster gets caught in the blast as Shakiro reveals his trick too bad for the creature because his sensing ability is flawless. As long as blood flows through their bodies, he can sense it, and he tracked every single tentacle burrowing underground. Shakiro declares this is payback and promises to show the boss the finest sundial technique as his clock eye blazes with power. Shakiro's sundial technique detonates with catastrophic force. The massive explosion tears through the boss monster in this devastating display of clock generation power. Then the dust settles and Shakiro stands there victorious among the wreckage. But the boss monster staggers back in shock, realizing the situation has completely reversed. The creature remarks how the tables have turned, noting that this time it's the one running from the monster. Shakiro declares the boss isn't getting away and takes off pursuing it through the dungeon. He activates clock sense to track his prey, scanning the area. His ability confirms there's no sign of other monsters nearby, so Shakiro decides to collect the defeated monsters and make his escape. He uses watch storage to gather the corpses, and apparently the ability evolved through training from only storing small parts to having near-infinite storage capacity now. After collecting everything, he pulls out an energy cube to restore his stamina. Man, water tastes incredible after a battle like that. The energy cube is basically a condensed lump of his life force stored in the watch space that restores stamina when consumed. He's been training by creating them, using them to restore stamina, and repeating the cycle. Figures he should restore his energy while he has the chance. His recovery completes and Shakiro takes off running. He needs to move. As he leaps through the desolate dungeon environment, something suddenly catches his eye. He slows down, staring at flowers growing in this hellish place, here of all places. Shakiro activates clock manipulation on the flowers, turning back time just a little to restore them. He tells the flowers to hang in there and that he'll do his best too. And honestly, since the day he was exiled from the royal capital, this is the first time he's felt like he was seeing something truly beautiful. Then Shakiro blasts through the dungeon levels with explosive force. He spots stairs leading upward and declares there they are, all that's left is to just keep climbing up. Shakiro enters an ornate chamber with elaborate chandelier decorations, but suddenly multiple skeletal monsters ambush him from all sides. He engages them in rapid combat, moving through the chamber and taking them down one after another. Eventually, Shakiro arrives at a massive ceremonial chamber with flowing curtain-like structures surrounding a circular platform. The platform features an intricate sundial-like design at its center, with a doorway structure in the background. Then a mysterious voice speaks, remarking that it's rare for a human to come up from below. Shakiro wonders about this place and activates clock sense to scan the area, but gets no sign of any living creatures. The voice continues with an amused tone, telling him not to panic. Shakiro realizes with alarm that whatever's speaking isn't reacting to his detection ability. He frantically searches for the source. Suddenly, a massive dark vortex manifests in the chamber. The voice announces that it is the guardian of the mid-layer of the Dungeon of Judgment, and a menacing creature's face begins to emerge from the swirling darkness. The creature fully reveals itself as a massive elder race being, looming over Shakiro with glowing eyes and a fearsome maw, and Shakiro immediately recognizes what he's facing. The elder race guardian opens its jaws wide, displaying rows of razor-sharp teeth, and the true menace has finally appeared. Shakiro stares up at the creature with grim determination, realizing this one hit's different from all the monsters he's fought before. The Elder Wraith fully reveals itself in all its monstrous glory, declaring it's the guardian of the middle floors of the Labyrinth of Condemnation. It announces its title as an Elder Wraith, and the creature's voice echoes through the chamber as massive clock gears materialize around them. Shakiro processes what he just heard about the middle floors. Then it hits him with shock that the Labyrinth of Condemnation is actually the deep hole itself. The Elder Wraith coldly states that now that Shakiro's encountered it, his life is forfeit. This is Shakiro facing an unknown enemy far beyond anything he's dealt with before. The Elder Wraith launches its attack, roaring that it's taking Shakiro's life as a massive torrent of flames erupts toward him. Shakiro activates Clockwork Generation to defend himself, but the heat from the flames is so intense he feels it burning his hand. He realizes the searing heat distracted him and threw off his focus. Meanwhile, the Elder Wraith commands the flames to burn Shakiro to ashes, and the attack engulfs him completely. The creature lets out a cry as the flames rage, but at the last possible moment, Shakiro manages to block the attack with a clock-based shield. The Elder Wraith observes that he blocked it just in the nick of time. Then Shakiro analyzes the situation, noting that since no blood flows through the creature's body, it doesn't trigger his detection ability. This opponent's a spirit-type monster, which explains why his clock sense couldn't detect it earlier. Shakiro declares he's hated the Elder Wraith's condescending attitude from the very start, so he activates Clockwork Generation and launches a massive counterattack. The clash between his power and the Elder Wraith creates this explosive collision of energy, and the creature reacts with a pained grunt as the attack connects. Meanwhile, the explosion from their clash just keeps raging. Shakiro's celebrating that his attack actually worked, but then the Elder Wraith staggers back in disbelief, exclaiming it's impossible that a mere human could wield magic capable of wounding it. The creature yells for Shakiro to shut up and just drop dead already as it prepares another attack. But then it starts questioning what's happening as Shakiro activates yet another Clockwork Generation, creating even more massive clock mechanisms around them. The Elder Wraith's form begins to dissolve and disintegrate, and the creature's wondering in desperation how this could even be happening. Its body breaks apart into dark shadows and fragments, and the creature screams in agony as it falls, its massive form crumbling under the power of Shakiro's attack. As the Elder Wraith's body continues dissolving into shadows and fragments, Shakiro looks on in shock, wondering if he actually did it. Then someone comments that they don't know about this whole Elder business, but the creature wasn't all that much after all. The speaker laughs and looks down at the striped tail on the ground, figuring they'll just collect the corpse. Suddenly, a massive attack strikes Shakiro from behind. The Elder Wraith reveals itself, taunting that he fell for it. Shakiro barely reacts before understanding hits him. These wraiths enter human corpses to control them, and this one is a high-ranking species that possess the body. The Elder Wraith admits Shakiro went way further than it expected. Then, a massive cursed energy erupts from the creature. The Wraith declares it's gonna curse Shakiro to death while he's still alive and make his body the vessel for its new form. The cursing attack slams into Shakiro with overwhelming force. Shakiro feels the cursed power ripping through him, like his heart's being clawed apart from the inside with sharp talons. The Elder Wraith asks mockingly what he'll do now, the creature grinning with malicious satisfaction. But Shakiro forces himself to focus, realizing this isn't the time to hesitate. Suddenly, the Elder Wraith realizes in shock that Shakiro's about to take himself down too. Shakiro activates Clock Generation with massive energy swirling around him, accepting the situation and saying they'll see which of them burns to death first. Shakiro challenges the Wraith to see who can last longer. The Elder Wraith questions in disbelief if this human is even sane. Their powers clash in a massive explosion of mutual destruction. The Wraith screams in agony. The creature realizes that even standing while bearing its curse should be impossible. But Shakiro pushes through the Elder Wraith's flames and cursed energy, forces himself forward with one final surge, and launches a massive counterattack, breaking free from the Wraith's assault. Shakiro celebrates his victory as the Elder Wraith dissolves behind him. But suddenly, the Elder Wraith announces possession is complete. It plans to feast on humans with Shakiro's body. Shakiro realizes he can't move and struggles to resist as the possession takes hold. The Elder Wraith mocks him, pointing out he'll actually become the criminal everyone accused him of being. The Wraith questions if Shakiro really thought he could win with such weak attacks. Then suddenly, a massive energy force erupts from Shakiro, repelling the Elder Wraith. The creature reacts in shock as the concentrated mass pushes it away. Shakiro's voice rings out as the massive clock mechanisms spin around him. He declares that he will absolutely escape this dungeon to prove wrong the world that denied him. The Elder Wraith responds with dismissive contempt, calling it nonsensical drivel and telling him his world ends here. The command comes, "Begone." The life force energy obliterates the Elder Wraith in a massive blast, Shakiro's clockwork eye blazing with power as the attack tears through everything. The explosion keeps ripping through the dungeon chamber in a catastrophic burst of energy and destruction. Meanwhile, the Elder Wraith's chains begin dissolving as the creature gasps out its final words, demanding how Shakiro dared to do this and how he could have even done it. Its form breaks apart along with the bindings, while Shakiro just stands there exhausted and silent. Then a text box explains that what saved him was an energy cube, a mass of his own life energy that he created. Shakiro reflects on what the Elder Wraith said about this being the middle layer, meaning there are still plenty of strong monsters below this level. He stares at the clock mechanism in his hands, thinking about how the clock user skill isn't almighty or perfect depending on how he uses it. He could even lose. He needs to remember that limitation. After a moment though, he decides reflection time is over and suddenly reacts with confusion to something. Shakiro realizes his hair has turned completely white. The shock hits him as he stares at his reflection, wondering if the curse did this and whether it'll go away. But then he decides there's no real harm done, so whatever time to go. Below him lies the massive defeated body of the Elder Wraith. Shakiro breaks through the debris and rubble, emerging from the depths as he climbs upward along the dungeon walls, pushing himself forward with everything he's got. The massive staircase stretches ahead of him, leading to the surface, with destruction scattered everywhere from his battle. Then Shakiro walks through a bright corridor, finally reaching the upper levels. His face fills the frame, white hair falling around him as tears stream down his cheeks. Suddenly, Shakiro emerges into the open air and throws his arms up toward the sky. He yells, "I am back," and the cry echoes across North Foria. Meanwhile, down below, adventurers watch the scene unfold. One observer notes that Cyclo Owen just became the first human to solo clear the mid-level of the worst dungeon. But another adventurer mutters that maybe the dungeon finally drove him nuts, wondering what the hell he's even talking about. Back in the royal capital without Shakiro, things start falling apart. The guild master and others show signs of distress and Maria looks panicked. A narration box explains their fate had begun to spiral out of control. At another location, someone thanks Sage Alice for her hard work, then another person asks if they should send this job's payment to her again. Alice responds with determination, saying, "Big brother is hopeless, so I have to do my best." The scene shifts to show an ornate grandfather clock, and a narration notes that as expected, only he can fix this clock. Another text box states that Cyclo's fate also begins to change dramatically, as a wealthy noblewoman stands before the clock with her attendants. Someone whispers urgently to the noblewoman, and she stares ahead with an intense expression, her face framed by elaborate hair and jewelry. Then the command comes, "Find them as quickly as possible." Meanwhile, inside a grand ceremonial hall, Maria and the hero stand at the top of the grand staircase while a crowd gathers below. Suddenly, an announcement rings out identifying clock user Cyclo Owen to the assembled masses. Outside the North Folia frontier gate, Shakiro approaches the entrance. It's been a while since he's seen these walls, and the sight brings back memories. At the gate checkpoint, he pulls up his deep hole exploration permit from his clock storage interface, thinking to himself that he's probably the only one who's cleared down to the middle layers with this ability. The gate official asks to see his permit. Then Shakiro walks through the streets trying to find the Adventurers Guild, stopping to ask someone for directions. But a guard notices his slave collar and dismissively identifies him as a criminal slave, telling him to just keep moving. Meanwhile, townspeople start gossiping as he passes. They stare at his collar, speculate whether he's a runaway, and complain about how filthy he looks. Suddenly, the townspeople panic when Shakiro approaches. One tells him to stay away while another asks if they should report him to the guards. Shakiro desperately tries to explain that they've got it wrong, but frustration overwhelms him. He lashes out with a strike, and the surrounding people react in shock and fear. But then Shakiro stops himself and realizes the bitter truth. No matter how powerful the skills he can use have become, he's still just a criminal slave in everyone's eyes. The realization hits him hard as he stands alone in the street. Shakiro tries to remember his way through the city streets, navigating the unfamiliar paths. As he walks through an alley with stairs, he mutters a name, Hikaru. The word seems to trigger something, a memory or recognition from his past. Shakiro walks through the ruins of an abandoned building. The place is completely trashed with broken furniture, debris scattered everywhere, and torn papers hanging on the walls. The desolate atmosphere weighs heavy as he navigates through the wreckage. Then the camera pulls back to show the full extent of the ruins. A woman with long hair sits chained on the floor in the corner of the room, a metal collar locked around her neck. Papers are pinned to the walls, one of them reading something about 7 years of freedom. The space feels like a forgotten prison cell. The chained woman looks up at Shakiro with surprise. A child in a place like this catches her off guard. She stares at him for a moment before catching herself and apologizing for staring. Shakiro asks if she knows where the Adventurers Guild is since he's lost. But the woman's expression shifts to fear as she processes what she's seeing. Shakiro realizes she's terrified because of his criminal slave collar, the chains on both of them creating an uncomfortable parallel. Despite her fear though, the woman manages to give him directions. She tells him to go out and take the stairs on the left, her voice shaky, but she pushes through to help him anyway. Shakiro thanks her sincerely, and his clock eye gleams as he looks at her one last time before leaving. After he's gone, the woman just sits there alone in the empty ruins. Shakiro thinks to himself that she looked like that white flower he saw down in the deep hole. Then Shakiro walks away from the chained woman, his back to her as he heads toward the exit. He thanks her sincerely, telling her that because of her help he can move forward again. Later, people at what looks like a tavern spot someone passing by. Meanwhile at the guild, there's commotion as someone notices something significant. The scene shifts between the ruins, the massive guild building exterior where Shakiro can be seen as a small figure, and various reactions to his presence. Then comes this dramatic declaration moment. The speaker announces they're calling the guildmaster, declaring themselves as the man who crawled back from the depths of hell, Cyclo Owen. They proclaim their changing fate starting right here. The intensity of the moment is captured in the determined expression and bold statement. Meanwhile, at the royal capital Artisans Guild, chaos erupts. The guild master loses his composure completely, throwing his hands up in frustration as papers fly everywhere around him. He screams about why there are so many consecutive contract cancellations. His son tries to calm him down, asking his father to settle down a bit. But someone else starts to explain that this all started because of something specific. The situation escalates as the guild master rips into his son, yelling that his son is even more incompetent than that useless Cyclo, and that it's his fault Lady Olivia's precious watch broke after only lasting 3 days. The son desperately denies being inferior to Cyclo. Meanwhile, down below, the other craftsmen are in an uproar. Someone notices a chipped gear and asks if the guild master is around. Others start complaining that Cyclo's being blamed as a bastard who thought he could get away with half-assed patch jobs, saying that everything is falling apart because of his sloppy repairs. Then the craftsmen rebel. The job skill holders have had enough and confront management as a group, furious that they're being worked to the bone for the same cheap wages as amateurs. One yells that they can't get any real work done because they're stuck cleaning up after greenhorn rookies who get all the assignments. Another complains that the workload distribution is a total mess. They demand to know what the guild thinks job skill holders even are, but the guild master completely snaps. He screams at them to shut up, his face contorted in rage, firing back that the people they're calling rookies are actually general skill holders with multiple qualifications, unlike the job skill holders who are useless and can only do one type of work. He demands they pay back the debt of their employment even if it means giving up their holidays. Meanwhile, someone observes Shakiro and the situation, understanding exactly what he's thinking. The guild master and other craftsmen surround him with stern expressions, and the guild master dismisses Shakiro casually, telling him to get back to work. The craftsmen finally snap. One of them yells that he's quitting this shitty guild, demanding to know who the hell would even work for the guild master. Then another craftsman joins in, yelling that he can get work even without the guild's mediation and telling the guild master to drop dead. A physical confrontation breaks out as the rebellion escalates. Meanwhile, back in a quieter moment, two people are discussing the whole situation. One of them comments that firing Cyclo was honestly a crazy move. The other one questions whether Cyclo was really the culprit at all, pointing out that it was a false accusation since he's just a guy who thinks about nothing but clocks. Suddenly, the guild master's son rushes over asking if his father is all right. But the guild master just screams at him to shut up and get out too. The son stammers an acknowledgement. Later on, the guild master collapses among scattered cancellation notices all over the floor. The guild master loses it completely, cursing repeatedly in frustration. His face twists in distress as he rants about the situation. He seethes that if Cyclo were here, he'd make him go apologize for his sloppy repairs. Someone questions what the hell a clock user even is anyway as the camera pulls back to show the guild building exterior. Meanwhile, in another part of the capital, people are going about their business, two maids chatting outside a building, a guard patrolling the streets, and the whole city bustling with activity near the clock tower. Then an elegant woman with styled hair appears. Someone tells her not to push herself, and she thanks them softly. The scene shifts as Lord Bugen approaches. Miranda greets him, and he responds warmly with a hello. Miranda tells Lord Bugen she's always so grateful. He responds that caring for the hearts of the citizens is also the duty of a constable after all. The scene shows a pleasant tea gathering in a garden with flowers blooming all around them, young Shakiro is present at the gathering. Someone comments that they still can't believe Shiklo is a serial rapist, but Miranda defends him, saying he's truly a good boy at heart and she believes he'll definitely get back on his feet. Lord Bujin tells Miranda she certainly has a way with words, then explains that Shakiro's gonna be working as a servant in some distant town to help with his rehabilitation, all thanks to the influence of the Bajak family, of course. Miranda thanks Lord Bujin warmly, expressing her gratitude. Lord Bujin addresses her casually, then asks about that matter they discussed earlier, wondering if she's given it any thought. Meanwhile, the narration grimly notes that by now, Shakiro is likely suffering a fate worse than death as a criminal slave. An image shows him bloodied and broken. At the destination of the invitation, a carriage travels along a road. Lord Bujin suggests to Miranda that she should visit his territory as a little trip, mentioning she needs a change of pace right now. Miranda holds the invitation, thinking about how he even arranged the carriage, the guard, and the driver, reflecting that Lord Bujin is such a truly kind person. An elderly man in a hat greets them enthusiastically at their destination, waving around with serious energy. The guard exchanges a brief greeting with Miranda and she responds back, but then she suddenly gasps, startled by something. Miranda realizes the bodyguard is involved in whatever's about to go down. The bodyguard apologizes, explaining this is just part of his job. Miranda screams for help, calling out to Lord Bujin, but then a voice responds coldly, telling the bodyguard this is his reward for this time and that they'll be counting on him again. A hand grabs Miranda, and her face shows complete shock as the betrayal becomes crystal clear. The assault begins as Miranda gets restrained, her muffled protests barely audible. A man's face appears with this satisfied smile plastered across it. Miranda calls out weakly for Lord Bujin, still not fully comprehending what's actually happening to her. Then Miranda realizes she's been deceived, the truth just crashes down on her all at once. But suddenly another horrifying thought strikes her, this time about Cyclo 2. She tries to reject the possibility, but as she notices the slave collar, the reality becomes undeniable. Someone nearby observes that the slave collar confirms it really is him. Meanwhile, Shakiro identifies himself as Cyclo Owen, making it clear he's no imposter. Guanoyej, the adventurer's guildmaster, stares at him in complete disbelief and asks if he really returned from the deep hole. Shakiro confirms it, explaining he was pushed in by a piece of shit adventurer, and the guild members around the table look absolutely shocked at his survival. Guanoyej mentions the report claimed Shakiro was attacked by a monster, panicked, and fell off the cliff. But Shakiro immediately calls out the bullshit story. He explains he was being relentlessly abused by the guild members, they pretended to push him off the cliff, but he actually fell. Guanoyej acknowledges that if Shakiro's testimony is true, then the guild members are all at fault, and giving a false report can't be overlooked either. Meanwhile, the guilty adventurers start panicking among themselves. One whispers they thought they wouldn't get caught. Shakiro tells them to pick a better place to kill someone off next time. He says thanks to them, he survived and even managed to get stronger, so with them getting punished, it's a win-win for him. His face fills the panel, showing his evolved appearance with the clockwork eye design, and he thanks them, the gratitude dripping with sarcasm. But then one of the guild members snaps and attacks Shakiro, cursing and yelling that he should have just dropped dead. Weapons fly toward Shakiro as multiple adventurers join the assault. Guanoyej watches in alarm, realizing they're trying to kill him. But Shakiro's enhanced perception kicks in and he sees the attacks coming in slow motion, calling out that they're too slow. Shakiro counters with devastating force, striking back at his attackers. The impact sends the guild members flying. One cries out as they're knocked down, completely overwhelmed by Shakiro's newfound power. Standing over the defeated adventurers, Shakiro adds that he'll be including attempted murder in their list of crimes too. The beaten guild members can barely process what happened. One mutters in disbelief that this little brat just demolished them. Shakiro stares at a massive hourglass in shock. The guilty adventurers are trapped inside as sand pours down on them. His mind races, trying to understand what he's seeing, and it hits him the hourglass is some kind of magical torture device, and the sand is already starting to fall. Someone tells him to confess the truth before it's too late, but Shakiro tries attacking it and nothing works. Once 10 minutes pass, all the sand in that hourglass will drop and crush them. Guanoyej tells Shakiro they were interrupted but should get back to the subject. Meanwhile, the trapped adventurers complain about how cramped it is inside. Guanoyej asks regarding how exactly Shakiro returned from the deep hole, and Shakiro agrees to explain. The scene shifts to an ornate corridor where Shakiro sits in a prison cart, surrounded by guards and guild members. Guanoyej listens and acknowledges the story, thanking Shakiro for telling him and noting he's been through a lot. But then Shakiro says he'd like to believe the story, asking if there's any proof that Shakiro went to the deep levels of the dungeon. Shakiro says of course, and activates his interface display, showing the hexagonal grid with various monster icons. Then Shakiro pulls out a massive monster corpse right there in the corridor. The giant skeletal creature materializes and crashes down. Guanoyej and the others freak out, yelling about what that thing is and where he even pulled it from. Shakiro casually mentions he's got plenty of other things too, but Guanoyej quickly tells him that's enough and he's proven himself. Later, Shakiro sits at a table thinking about whether the monster materials are worth something. Nearby, guild staff discuss getting the alchemy potion ready for butchering and bringing someone with 5 skills. A girl serves him herb tea and notices he hasn't touched it, asking if he dislikes it. Shakiro apologizes, explaining there's just too much to remember. His mind flashes back to memories of people from his past. The girl asks how the appraisal went. Then a staff member tells Shakiro the results are in. The value comes to 10,000 gold coins or 100 platinum coins, though that's just a rough estimate. Shakiro thinks back to when he was a watchmaker, remembering his annual income was about 1 platinum coin. Now he's looking at 100 platinum coins from a single haul. The guild staff shows Shakiro the appraisal results, asking if he's sure he can really take all of this. They explain that according to the appraisal, everything belongs to undiscovered monsters. Shakiro confirms he'll take it all. The visualization shows coins and watches floating and sparkling in this elaborate display. Meanwhile, Shakiro processes the information and realizes this amount equals 100 times his annual income when he was a watchmaker. Suddenly, Guanoyej bows his head to Shakiro. The guild master tells him that as a fellow human being, he needs to apologize for turning a blind eye to Shakiro's treatment. He admits he was aware Shakiro was being abused. Guanoyej explains that he weighed Shakiro against the adventurers and chose the side that benefited the guild, acknowledging that Shakiro is a notorious criminal slave. Shakiro responds that the guild master is basically saying he just let it happen. Guanoyej confirms it was a necessary decision for the guild. Shakiro recoils and covers his face. He stares at Guanoyej with this irritated expression and tells him it's just self-satisfaction. Guanoyej agrees he can put it that way. But then Shakiro responds by saying that at least this means the guild master won't be an enemy. He addresses Guanoyej directly, telling him in that case there's something he wants. Shakiro holds up the certificate worth 10,000 gold. He tells Guanoyej to use these 10 platinum coins to release him from criminal slavery. The system gets explained as the reparation system, where a criminal slave can buy themselves back and become free by paying an amount corresponding to the weight of their crime. Guanoyej reacts in shock at the mention of the reparation system. Shakiro sits down and tells him he wants to be free and get his adventurer's license. Shakiro asks if Guanoyej will take this on as the guild master, and the guild master agrees without hesitation. He orders someone to unleash the shackles, and Shakiro's face shows pure determination as he thinks about how much he appreciates Guanoyej being so quick to understand the situation. Shakiro wakes up as a free man, finally awakening from his days of slavery. He stretches outdoors near some buildings and realizes it's been forever since he slept in an actual bed. His thoughts drift back to that chained woman he met before, and he recalls that when he went back to that abandoned ruin later, the girl was gone. He figures there's no way someone would actually be living in a dump like that. Maybe he was just seeing things. Meanwhile, the guild girl from earlier spots Shakiro arriving and immediately rushes off to call Guanoyej. Another staff member greets him with formality, calling him Lord Cyclo. The guild girl approaches nervously to greet him, and Shakiro notices how drastically everyone's attitude toward him has changed. Moving inside, the staff informs him they've already opened a savings account for him. Everything's been taken care of. Guanoyej greets him, and another staff member mentions they're ready with his adventurer registration. Shakiro appreciates how quickly they're moving things along. The staff presents Shakiro with his guild card and adventurer registration, but the card shows his rank as black, which Shakiro has never seen before. A diagram explains the universal adventurer ranking system. At the bottom are F through D ranks where all rookies start, B and C ranks fight large monsters as part of groups, A rank adventurers can defeat large monsters solo, S rank possesses rare job skills, and at the very top is legendary rank. The diagram notes that back when Shakiro was a porter, he was treated as below F rank, with examples shown including Alice, Raven, and other high-ranking adventurers. Guanoyej reveals that Shakiro's guild card is the legendary black card, then tells him it'll be faster if he just sees his rank for himself. The guild master shows him this massive mechanical device, explaining it's a specially made status measuring device. Shakiro notices this thing is way different from the normal measuring devices. Those ones are much simpler. Guanoyej explains that in Shakiro's case, normal measuring devices won't work. The normal device shows a simple rank C display with instructions to grip the bar to start the test. The staff asks if Shakiro knows how to perform the measurement, and Shakiro confirms he understands. He thinks back to when he was just a porter and used to admire these measurements. He wants to know how much stronger he's become during his time in the deep hole. Shakiro grips the device with determination. The machine processes his stats and suddenly displays this incredibly long string of text showing his measurements, with various abbreviated stats like STR, MAG, RES, and others just filling the entire screen. Then the display shows Shakiro's guild rank as SSS. Shakiro stares in complete shock at the result, while background guild members are asking how amazing it is. Guanoyej notes that these numbers are certainly worthy of his achievements, then decides to put it in perspective for Shakiro using his sister Alice as an example, Alessandria, who's famously known as the Great Sage. Guanoyej explains that even an S-rank adventurer like Alice usually only has S-rank in their specialty, with other stats being A or B. He tells Shakiro that his results mean he's above Alice in every single rank. Shakiro looks overwhelmed, saying it's just unbelievable. Guanoyej smiles confidently and addresses him, telling Shakiro this is a magnificent feat that's rare even in the annals of history. Shakiro holds his black card, thinking it doesn't really feel real to him though. Suddenly, a large cloaked figure approaches Shakiro with a request, asking if he would be willing to meet with the Lord right away. Shakiro looks surprised by the sudden invitation. The messenger explains that when the Lord heard about Shakiro, he showed quite an interest, and said he'd like to hear more from him directly. Shakiro considers the opportunity. If he can establish a connection with someone in power, this could be the foothold he needs to get back at those who treated him so unfairly. The messenger appreciates his consideration, and Shakiro tells them it's fine, not a bad deal for him either. He figures he should also make sure his attire is appropriate for meeting a lord. Shakiro arrives at a building with a sign reading Salon Kitsune. Inside the elegant salon with traditional Japanese design elements, staff welcome him. Shakiro explains he has a referral from the Adventurers Guild and is looking for some equipment, but a staff member panics about how out of place this seems and asks for his guild card. The staff member looks at the card and freezes. She asks him to wait just a moment, clearly shocked by what she's seeing. Then an older craftsman in a checkered vest greets Shakiro, saying it's an honor to meet an SS-rank adventurer and promises to prepare the finest equipment worthy of such a customer. Shakiro observes the craftsman's hands and gets a feeling he'll do a good job, so he asks when it'll be ready. The craftsman asks him to wait right there and reveals his job skill is Grand Couturier, a high-order seamster position. The craftsman works with incredible speed, his hands moving rapidly with thread and tools flying everywhere. Shakiro watches in amazement, thinking it's almost like the guy's conducting an orchestra. Within moments, the craftsman finishes and thanks him for waiting. The completed outfit is revealed, and Shakiro examines it, saying he likes the design but feels like something's missing. The craftsman asks him to bring his hand closer to the clothes, so Shakiro does exactly that, and suddenly he notices something. His eyes widen as he discovers some kind of mechanism or feature built into the outfit that he didn't expect. Meanwhile, Shakiro's standing there in the salon wearing his new outfit, the cape flowing dramatically behind him, when the Grand Couturier asks if it meets his satisfaction. Shakiro looks down at the embroidered pattern on the fabric, and the craftsman explains that the pattern actually represents the form of his magical essence. Then Shakiro touches the material and feels this immediate connection like it felt right the moment he put it on. The Grand Couturier smiles with satisfaction, and Shakiro thanks him enthusiastically, saying he loves it so much. Now Shakiro's walking through the salon in his complete new gear when a staff member tells him she'll recommend some other items for him and wishes him a good adventure. He leaves the Salon Kitsune shop, ready for whatever comes next. The next day arrives, and a grand mansion with ornate architecture and manicured gardens sits under a clear sky. Inside an elegant room, Shakiro waits on a couch. Someone enters and apologizes for keeping him waiting, commenting that his gear looks pretty nice. Shakiro responds casually, just acknowledging it. Then an elegant woman with refined features introduces herself as Deimos Northphalia. She gestures to a young boy beside her, explaining this is her son, Cruz Northphalia. Cruz looks nervous but tries his best, introducing himself politely. Shakiro keeps it simple and tells them he's the adventurer Cyclo Owen. Cruz seems flustered by the whole situation. But then Shakiro catches on to something she said, internally questioning if she really just said son. Deimos apologizes, explaining that Cruz was dying to meet him because he looks up to adventurers. Setting that aside for now, Deimos gets down to business. She tells Shakiro the reason she called him here today is because she's got 3 things to discuss. But before she can continue, Shakiro cuts in and says he knew it. He tells her to let him say something before she goes any further. An older man with an eye patch sits beside Cruz on one side of the room, and he calls out to Shakiro, addressing him as Cyclo-kun. But Shakiro makes his position clear right away. He tells them this is a negotiation between equals, and he's not going to act all formal just because they're nobles. He drives the point home, saying he's not the one who should be showing courtesy, they're the ones who want something from him, so in the first place, they're the ones who should be showing respect. The room goes quiet. Meanwhile, Daimos smiles at his boldness. Cruz clasps his hands together, clearly impressed by how cool Shakiro is, and the older man's expression remains stern and unreadable. Then Daimos responds calmly, telling him she gets it. She explains it's not like she wants to act all high and mighty with an SS-rank adventurer after all. Shakiro says he knew she was a reasonable person. Moving to the matter at hand, Daimos states she's prepared to offer at least 100 platinum coins, and Cruz nearly jumps out of his seat in shock at the amount. Shakiro considers the reward for a moment and tells her to continue. Daimos begins with her first request. She wants to buy information on the deep hall from him. The scene then shifts to show the grand architecture of the North Folia estate from outside. Meanwhile, Daimos thanks Shakiro, saying this is more than enough information. She notes that it's actually pretty surprising the place he fell into was the middle tier and not the deep tier. Shakiro tells her that's as much as he can tell her, reminding her not to forget his reward. Daimos acknowledges this and moves on to their next topic. In the elegant dining room, Daimos invites Shakiro to stay for dinner. She says she'd like to talk more, but it's already getting late and her son would be happy if he stayed. Cruz perks up with visible excitement at the possibility. Shakiro hesitates, about to decline, but then the scene transitions to them at the dinner table. Daimos brings up the second thing she wanted to discuss, which involves Shakiro himself. Meanwhile, Cruz celebrates enthusiastically in the background as Shakiro reluctantly agrees to stay. Daimos takes Shakiro's hand gently and tells him directly that she doesn't consider him a criminal. Shakiro looks up at her with visible surprise. She explains she took the liberty of looking into his trial records, and they're appalling. To give an SS-rank adventurer a criminal record through such a sloppy trial is unacceptable. Shakiro asks if she's saying his arrest was a false accusation, and Daimos confirms that's exactly right. An aerial view of North Folia shows the sprawling city with its heraldic crest displayed prominently. Daimos continues, saying she doesn't know what the royal capital thinks, but at least within the jurisdiction of North Folia, he's a free man. She tells him with a smile that given the situation, he should keep taking on requests. Shakiro looks at her thoughtfully and tells her she's a strange one. Meanwhile, a servant nearby mentions that Daimos gets told that a lot. An elaborate spread of food is laid out on the table, complete with wine glasses and ornate silverware. Daimos welcomes him properly, explaining these are all local dishes from North Folia. Shakiro thanks her and says he'll gladly accept. As he eats, Shakiro reflects internally, his hunger is fixed now, so he doesn't actually get hungry. He wonders how long it's been since he had a proper meal. The truth is he doesn't really need to eat anymore. Shakiro sits at the table, staring down at his meal and asking what it is. The thought crosses his mind that it's been a while since he's had a proper meal. The sound of utensils against the plate fills the moment as he begins to eat. Then, as Shakiro takes a bite, a genuine smile spreads across his face. He never knew food could be this delicious. Daimos notices and asks if he needs seconds, while Cruz watches with enthusiasm. Shakiro asks if he can have more and someone confirms he can. The narration notes that Shakiro's heart is finally full. Daimos tells him that at the very least, she might be able to trust him more than the others. Cruz chimes in cheerfully, saying just a little bit though. The scene transitions to show the illuminated North Folia mansion glowing against the night sky. Daimos announces that this is finally her last request, noting that what she's about to ask is something only Shakiro, an SSS-rank adventurer, can do. She reveals a covered dish as she speaks. Shakiro tenses up, listening carefully. Then Daimos makes her request clear. She wants him to explore the deepest depths of the deep hole. Daimos explains that by doing this, he'll get stronger and complete the request at the same time, killing two birds with one stone. Shakiro simply responds that he'll do it. Daimos laughs, saying she's glad to hear such a good answer. But then she adds one more detail. She wants him to complete a full conquest of the deep hole. An explanation appears over images of crumbling stone ruins. The complete conquest of a dungeon means defeating the guardian of the deepest level and shutting down the dungeon's functions. Once a dungeon gets cleared, its traps vanish and the number of monsters plummets until they eventually disappear entirely. Shakiro asks if that's really okay, pointing out that North Folia is thriving thanks to the deep hole. The scene shows the bustling town, merchants, adventurers, the whole deal. Meanwhile, Daimos, shown in silhouette, acknowledges that it's true, the development of this land has been intertwined with the deep hole. She reflects internally that Shakiro is someone who looks at her for who she really is. But then Daimos explains that the great disasters striking them also originate from the deep hole. Shakiro catches on pretty quick, asking if she means a stampede where dungeon monsters overpopulate and overflow onto the surface. Daimos confirms it. North Folia had no choice but to rely on dungeon resources to resist those dangers. She adds that if completing the dungeon could reduce that risk, she would honestly love to ask him to do it. Shakiro acknowledges that if monsters from the middle floors ever overflowed, the city would be annihilated. He looks back at the family, processing the weight of the situation. After a moment, he asks if Daimos is serious about this, then he gets practical and asks what the reward would be. Daimos promises to prepare as much of a reward as he desires, as far as she's able to provide, emphasizing it'll take as much as necessary. Daimos clasps her hands together, stating that a complete conquest of the deep hole is worth that much since it'll protect people from the threat of monsters. Shakiro gives a slight smile at this and tells her she's really different from the other nobles. Daimos laughs, saying she's glad to hear him say that, then she mentions there's something he'll need for the conquest. Daimos reveals that he'll need party members. Shakiro sets down his teacup, asking why he would need something like that. He insists he's more than enough on his own. Dark imagery flashes through his mind of past violence and betrayal as he continues his thought. Daima says she thought he might respond that way, but Shakiro admits he's really not in the mood to be betrayed by someone again though. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to show the grand building exterior at night. As Shakiro prepares to leave, Daimos tells him she knows a place where he can find exactly the kind of people he's looking for. Daimos suggests he should buy a slave bound by subordination magic, pointing out that at least he'd be able to trust them a little. Shakiro hesitates, thinking that he supposes that makes sense, but questioning the whole idea of owning a slave. The scene transitions to show him arriving at a slave shop. Turns out the shops recommended by Northfolia's big shots are quite impressive. An enthusiastic merchant greets him, thrilled to have a referral from the Lord himself, telling Shakiro to request whatever his heart desires. Shakiro tells the merchant he wants to buy a slave as a member for dungeon raiding, specifically one whose actions can be bound by subordination magic. The merchant confirms he understands. The shop turns out to be located right behind the Adventurers Guild. There's apparently a whole cycle of people going from slave to adventurer and back to slave again. The merchant returns enthusiastically, thanking Shakiro for waiting and addressing him as Lord Owen. Shakiro realizes all over again that the guild master is quite the shrewd businessman. Then the merchant asks if Shakiro is looking to conquer a dungeon and presents a group of chained slaves, explaining these were formerly B-rank and C-rank adventurers. A beast person slave sneers at Shakiro, asking if his job is babysitting in the dungeon. Shakiro figures this one's probably the strongest among them, but notes they've all got massive attitudes and even bigger pride, so he decides this is gonna be easy. Shakiro tells the merchant to introduce him to the slaves of other adventurers, pointing out that compared to himself, there's no real difference in any of their abilities. The merchant nervously agrees. After meeting with all the former adventurers though, Shakiro realizes none of them are strong enough to go to the deep layers of the deep hall. So Shakiro apologizes and changes his requirements, tells the merchant they can be weak. Just find him a slave who's as obedient and easy to handle as possible. The merchant asks if the previous ones didn't suit his fancy, then explains that if Shakiro's looking for a non-adventurer capable of using subjugation magic, he'd be looking at criminal slaves, pet slaves, or other options. After a pause, the merchant mentions they do happen to have one debt slave in stock. Shakiro's interest is immediately piqued. The merchant explains that legal slaves are those who are born into it or those whose status was determined later in life, adds that their slave was reduced to this status because of their job skill. Shakiro reacts with surprise at the mention of a job skill, then tells the merchant to bring them to him. The merchant asks if he's sure about this, and Shakiro insists he just do it and hurry. The merchant presents a young woman with long light-colored hair wearing chains and a slave collar, tells Shakiro this is the girl who's a status slave, though he can't exactly recommend her. Shakiro studies her carefully. Then the merchant reveals her job skill is cultist. Shakiro looks at the debt slave girl standing before him, and suddenly his mind flashes back to the chained woman prisoner he met in the abandoned ruins who helped him find his way. The realization hits him hard, this is the same person. The girl from the trash heap is standing right here in front of him. Shakiro turns on the merchant, demanding to know if he's been making her live in a place like that all this time. The girl looks like a complete wreck. He asks what the meaning is of how this child has been treated. The merchant stammers that it's the law, trying to defend himself. The explanation comes that it's decreed those with job skills hostile to the Church of Skill Selection must not be treated as human. Then Shakiro thinks back on his own situation. He used to believe no one was more miserable than him. He was given the job skill time user and it ruined his life. His sister became a sage and his childhood friend became a saint while he fell into despair and ruin. But looking at the girl now, he realizes what a spoiled idiot he was. The girl is chained and suffering, but Shakiro recognizes that compared to her, even with his job skill, he was never robbed of his freedom to live as a human being. He looks at her situation and comes to a conclusion. This country where job skills rule everything, religion, even God itself, all of this is wrong. Meanwhile, the merchant asks how the girl is and assumes she's not to Shakiro's liking. Shakiro tells him directly that he's buying this child. The merchant is shocked. Shakiro tells him to proceed with the paperwork as is. The merchant quickly agrees and bows. Shakiro and the girl stand facing each other in silence. Shakiro looks at her closely and asks what her name is, his clock eye mechanism visible as he waits for her response. The girl introduces herself as Miss Carmine, and Shakiro repeats her first name back to her. She reacts with a small gasp, looking emotional. He tells her it's a lovely name and introduces himself as Cyclo Owen. Shakiro can tell that Mist is terrified. He acknowledges to himself that it makes sense she'd be on guard naturally and that he has to let her know it's okay. He speaks to her directly, telling her he would never do anything to hurt her. Mist reacts with surprise at his words. Then Shakiro declares that from now on, he'll be the one to protect her. He promises to drive away anyone who tries to hurt her. Shakiro tells her it's a promise. Mist becomes emotional and silent as the panels show him removing the chains from her wrists and ankles one by one. Mist smiles gently and thanks him. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to the contract room, where the merchant informs Lord Owen that the preparations for the slavery contract are ready. He explains that if Shakiro channels his mana into the magic circle, the contract will be complete. Shakiro channels his magical power into the circle, and the merchant reacts with total shock at the incredible magical power flowing from him. Then a clock mechanism crest appears on Mist's neck. The merchant explains that the crest is proof of the submissive contract, and that when giving an order, Shakiro should channel magical power into it. He adds that the same applies when administering punishment, and it'll activate even from a distance provided the magical power is strong enough. Shakiro responds that he doesn't think he'll be doing that, but he'll keep it in mind. Shakiro asks Mist if they should get going. She tells him his hands will get dirty, but he says he doesn't mind. The scene shows their hands gripping a wooden staff together, both working side by side. Shakiro declares that from today on, she's his companion. Then the scene shifts to a flashback showing Mist in a ruined town. She looks determined and tells herself she has to do her best to help the father today. The panel shows memories of her childhood, including an image of a church building where she apparently grew up. In the flashback, Mist is helping at the church during a cold night. The priest tells her it's late and she should head home and that he'll need her help again tomorrow. He asks if she's cold. Mist says she's fine and asks if there's anything else she can help with. The priest responds that she's a big help. Mist agrees to leave. The priest smiles and tells her that God is always watching over them and that a good girl like Mist will surely be granted a wonderful skill. The scene pans over the ruined streets as narration states that God never abandons a good child. But then the scene continues with someone in the church telling Mist to get the place cleaned up since they're heading out. Another voice yells at her about how late she is and asks how long she's going to keep wandering around out there. Mist is shown cleaning while someone complains that kids are nothing but a nuisance. She quietly responds with agreement. Mist collapses from exhaustion but says she's okay. Her internal thoughts reflect that if she's a good child, surely someday things will get better. At her skill awakening ceremony, Mist stands there hoping that her patience will finally be rewarded. The moment arrives and she receives her skill, but her expression instantly turns to absolute shock and horror as the skill gets revealed to be cultist. The realization hits her like a devastating blow. The crowd reacts with pure terror at Mist's heretical skill. The priest who had been kind to her just moments ago now turns on her completely, calling her a filthy possessor of a heretical skill and ordering her to stay back. Mist tries to ask him what this even means, confused and desperate. Then the final panel shows a dramatic close-up of her face, revealing that both of her eyes now display visible clockwork mechanisms within them, spinning like gears. The flashback continues with Mist's bitter memories. In her mind, she recalls how even though she tried harder than anyone and was a better girl than anyone else, God never did anything for her. The scene shows a crowd of people with buildings in the background as these thoughts echo through her head. Mist appears in a maid outfit, calling out for her mom. A woman's smiling face appears in the memory, then the panel closes on Mist's face filled with anguish and tears streaming down her cheeks. Young Mist sits curled up in a spotlight, surrounded by accusing hands pointing at her from all directions. Her thoughts are filled with self-hatred as she believes she should never have been born and that she was a bad child. The scene shifts to a messy room with an unmade bed. Mist's internal voice continues, apologizing that someone like her is even alive. But then in the present, Shakiro reaches out to her and apologizes. Meanwhile, back at the slave shop, the merchant woman tells Mist about the person who spoke to her the other day. She explains that he said he's interested in Mist. The cultist mentions he's a customer. Mist's internal thoughts continue their pattern of self-loathing, apologizing for being born. She just stands there confused, wondering why anyone would be interested in someone like her. The scene shows their first meeting as Shakiro asks if her name is Mist. He reaches out and pats her head gently, and Mist immediately apologizes profusely. Shakiro reassures Mist that she doesn't have to worry. He tells her he would never do anything to hurt her. Mist reacts emotionally, her whole body trembling as she clenches her fist and says she's a bad girl. But Shakiro tells her that's not true, that she's wrong about herself. Then the scene shows them together as Shakiro makes his declaration. He promises that from now on, he'll be the one to protect her, that he'll drive away anyone who tries to hurt Mist just because of her job skill. Mist's face fills with emotion and tears start falling as she looks at Shakiro. She makes him promise. The panel shows her lying down, tears still streaming down her face as she tells him to please find his courage. In this dramatic visual, Shakiro and Mist reach toward each other, their hands connecting as bright light radiates between them. The scene captures the moment their bond is truly formed through this promise. Meanwhile, Mist's thoughts continue as she reflects on her past. No one would take her side, no one would believe her. Not her mother, not the people in town, not even God. And yet this person says they'll be on her side. Because of that promise, she knows she can move forward. The scene shows their hands reaching toward each other, light radiating between them as their bond solidifies. Mist addresses Shakiro directly in her thoughts. To her, who had given up on everything, he gave the courage to defy fate. She calls him master, and tears stream down her face as she speaks softly, thanking him. Time passes and an ornate carriage travels along a cobblestone path. Shakiro tells Mist they've arrived. She startles awake, apologizing like crazy for falling asleep, but he just laughs it off, saying it's totally fine. When she asks where they are, he explains it's the manor of the Lord of North Foria. As they enter through the ornate doorway of the manor, Mist reacts with total shock hearing they're at the Lord's manor. Shakiro explains that a lot has happened and the Lord's been taking care of him. Then Cruz runs out all enthusiastic, calling out to Lord Cyclo and saying he's come to visit again. She asks who the person with him is. Shakiro explains she's a party member and he has a small favor to ask. Someone observes that Mist looks like a princess, and Cruz eagerly agrees to help with anything at all. Mist wonders where they're going, and Cruz explains she'll have a change of clothes prepared for them. Shakiro thanks her, saying that's a big help. When Mist asks what happens next, the scene reveals this massive, ornate bathroom with elaborate arched architecture. Cruz tells them to take their time and wash off the sweat. Mist realizes they mean the bath. Shakiro confirms and says they'll go in together so he can wash her. Mist just stammers in confusion. Shakiro explains that Mist's stamina is down, so it's dangerous for her to be in a big bath alone. He adds that she's still a child. Mist protests that he's wrong. Shakiro guesses she's about 10 years old. She asks how old he thinks she is, and he looks surprised at the question. The panel closes on Mist's face as she reveals she's 17. Mist's face fills the panel with intensity as she speaks. She tells Shakiro that he has his skills and everything, so she's sorry. Shakiro simply says no. The panel shifts to show their feet standing apart in the ornate bathroom, his feet in shoes and hers bare. Mist looks up at him and insists she doesn't have any ulterior motives and promises she won't do anything like that. She acknowledges that going in alone is dangerous though. Shakiro apologizes about what he said regarding her age. Water flows through the bath in an artistic panel as Mist thinks to herself what a strange master he is. The scene shows them in the bathroom as Mist comments on how considerate he's being, telling him not to pull on it, addressing him as master. Then Shakiro brings up what happened earlier, and Mist asks why he doesn't just use a command. An ink bottle sits nearby as Shakiro says he understands. Shakiro explains he has no intention of using his commands for something like that. He wants Mist to be as free as possible. His hand reaches toward her face gently. In the bathroom, Shakiro calls out to Mist, apologizing and saying it's just that he's concerned. Mist smiles with her eyes closed, telling her master that it's because he's being so kind to her. She says it makes her so happy. The scene pulls back to show them in the bathroom as Shakiro responds that he sees, then confirms he understands. A close-up shows Mist's emotional face as the narration notes kindness reaching into a dark past. Meanwhile, through the large windows overlooking the garden, the transformation becomes clear. Shakiro sits with his tea as Mist enters, thanking him for waiting. She's been completely transformed from her slave girl appearance, now wearing an elegant dress with styled hair. Mist admires her new appearance, saying everyone at the manor dressed her in Lord Cruz's old clothes. They even styled her hair, and it's more than she deserves. A small panel shows the servants working on her styling. Shakiro tells her it looks really good on her, and Mist thanks him profusely. But Shakiro's face shows he's thinking about something. He produces a glowing energy cube and examines it, saying he sees. He tells Mist that next they need to solve the issue of her physical condition. She asks about her own condition with surprise. Mist watches as Shakiro manipulates his skill interface, hexagonal patterns glowing right in front of him. He confirms this is the one and starts searching through the interface. Meanwhile, Mist just looks on in total confusion as he works. The interface displays various materials as Shakiro locates exactly what he needs. Then he produces two ornate energy cubes that materialize in the air. Shakiro explains their energy cubes, basically a concentrated mass of his life energy. Mist asks what they are, and Shakiro looks at her with the clock mechanisms visible on his body and tells her to just eat it anyway. Mist questions whether he seriously wants her to eat this thing. Shakiro confirms that this energy cube is the real deal. He acknowledges that no matter how anyone looks at it, it doesn't look like food, but he admits it's some incredible stuff. Mist hesitates silently as the cubes float near her face, then Shakiro tells her to trust him. Mist looks determined despite her uncertainty and resolves that if her master says so, she'll do it. Mist tastes the energy cube and her expression immediately shifts to surprise as she discovers it's actually sweet. The sensation flows through her in waves of light and energy, and she keeps reacting as the cube's effects take hold, making soft sounds while Shakiro watches. Mist tells her master she's so hot, but Shakiro reassures her that it's a sign of recovery. The energy cube's restorative power courses through her body as she lies there, the clock mechanisms on Shakiro's clothing glowing with their usual intricate patterns. Mist lies in a peaceful state as the recovery process continues, her body relaxed, and the effects of the energy cube spreading through her system completely. The two of them look at each other closely, and Shakiro tells Mist to take a look at the mirror. Mist stands there transformed in this elaborate dress with intricate ribbons and frills, just staring at her reflection. Shakiro's standing right behind her as she takes in her restored appearance. The effects of the energy cube have completely healed her. She looks at herself with these clock mechanisms visible in her eyes and realizes this beautiful girl in the mirror is actually her. Shakiro tells Mist he already said she was incredible. Mist's eyes fill with emotion as she processes what he's done for her. She tells him it's really amazing and that he's just like a god. But Shakiro brushes off the praise and tells her she's exaggerating. Mist insists he's not exaggerating at all. Then Mist reflects on everything that happened. When the elder wraith was about to take over her master's body, he instinctively used his power and survived. In just one day he accomplished so much, earning even the elder race's seal of approval. The experience gave Mist so much happiness it overflowed, and she stands beside Shakiro in this peaceful moment together. Shakiro tells Mist that the reason he bought her is because he needs a companion to explore dungeons with as an adventurer. On top of that, he intends to give her only one order. Memories flash through his mind of all the people who betrayed him, Miranda, the guild master, Lord Raven, and the others who conspired against him. Mist clasps her hands together and quietly agrees. Shakiro looks at Mist with a gentle but determined expression, telling her that no matter what happens, she should believe in him, and Mist's eyes well up with tears at his words. She tells Shakiro she understands, and he confirms there's nothing else he desires from her. She asks if that's really all right with him, expressing concern that he must have gone through painful things too. Then Mist kneels formally before him and asks him to please give her his command, reassuring him not to worry about her past suffering. Shakiro reaches his hand toward Mist as they sit in the corridor, apologizing to her. But Mist quietly tells him no. She says even if there were no orders in this servitude contract, she can swear that she'll keep believing in him. The two sit together in the peaceful hallway with gridded windows behind them. Shakiro calls Mist's name softly and thanks her. The scene pulls back to show them sitting together in the manor's courtyard at night, surrounded by beautiful white flowers floating through the air like magic petals. Meanwhile, footsteps echo as someone arrives at a large mansion at night. Inside what looks like the Adventurers Guild office, staff members are chatting. One asks if anything interesting happened while they were on their expedition. Another mentions they heard about a party made up entirely of S-ranks, and someone calls that awesome. A staff member named Karim is told to save something for later and confirms the order. Then a hooded figure announces amazing news about a great adventurer who came back from an unexplored layer of the deep hole, and a woman in the office perks up with interest at this information. The woman, who's rocking this elaborate updo and wearing a striking black and white outfit, asks if they could tell her more about that, clearly interested in hearing about Cyclo's return from the unexplored dungeon layer. Later on, Shakiro tells Mist they should try activating her job skill today. The scene shows them walking through a town with European-style buildings and church towers. Meanwhile, the narration explains how the clock user was deemed useless and rejected, cast out from the Craftsman's Guild, but awakened to his true power in the depths of the dungeon. Mist looks concerned, asking if he's sure that's okay about activating her skill, and the narration notes the power hidden within her. Then Mist reveals her skill is Heretic. A flashback shows the crowd of people at what must have been her skill ceremony, her fists clenching nervously as she worries that if it's a dangerous skill, it could harm him or everyone in the mansion. But Shakiro tells her it's okay, promising that no matter what happens, he'll definitely take care of it. He clasps her trembling hands in his and tells her she's so kind. Mist looks at Shakiro with tears welling up in her eyes, calling him master. She tells him she understands and asks him to please take care of her, the scene showing her surrounded by floating white flowers, her expression full of emotion and gratitude. Shakiro tells Mist he sees and they should continue. Mist admits she was just a little surprised. The scene shows them in the courtyard together, with Mist's gentle expression visible as they prepare to move forward with her skill activation. Shakiro praises Mist, telling her well done and that was fast. Mist gets flustered and tells him this is embarrassing, though she thinks to herself that she doesn't really mind. Shakiro calls her so cute and says they'll move on to the next stage. The scene shifts to a starry background as Shakiro explains they should try moving the magic she found. He tells her there are all sorts of theories, like it's inside the soul, but anyway her skill is located there. There should be several places in her body where the magic flows in, so he instructs her to channel her magic from there and try to grasp the flow of magic. Shakiro thinks to himself that this is usually where people stumble, so he'll just wait patiently. But almost immediately Mist exclaims she found it, catching Shakiro completely off guard. He tells her to try channeling her magic power, and she confirms that's it. Mist describes the sensation as being inside her body but also kind of nowhere, noting it's a strange feeling. Shakiro tells her here they go. Mist announces she's going, calling him master, then power erupts from her in a massive display. The narration notes this is a skill of the heretics who are treated as outcasts. A massive ornate magical crest manifests in the sky above them, intricate and glowing with power. Shakiro stares up at it from below, observing the phenomenon with growing realization. Shakiro recognizes it as holy magic for healing. He notes it's covering such a wide area, realizing this is an area heal. He turns to Mist and exclaims that's amazing, telling her she's got powers just like a saint. The magical healing crest hovers above them, its ornate design radiating power across the entire courtyard. Shakiro explains that first of all, people who can use holy magic are rare, and even then at first they can only manage single-target healing. Mist gets flustered and overwhelmed by the healing power, prompting her to apologize and promise to be more careful next time. Shakiro tells her it hurts, but notes that what Mist does is really amazing since it's area healing. Mist activates her second skill, and suddenly a massive hexagonal barrier manifests above them in the courtyard. The magical defense wall spreads across the sky with dramatic force. Shakiro stares up at it and identifies it as barrier magic, a magic defense wall, then realizes what this could mean. Shakiro explains the difference between light magic, which handles attack, applying debuffs and protecting allies, versus holy magic, which covers support and healing. He tells Mist she's already able to use intermediate-level light magic from the start. Mist reacts with surprise at how capable she is. Shakiro confirms she seems to have an affinity for it, noting this means she can handle offense, defense, and support all through magic. When Mist asks if he knows a lot about this skill, Shakiro confirms he does and explains that his former fiancée had a holy-type job skill. The memory of Maria appears as he speaks. Mist understands now, realizing it must have been something they weren't supposed to talk about, comparing it to back then when things went wrong for Shakiro. The two stand together in the courtyard. Then Shakiro gets excited and says he bets the next skill is gonna be amazing too. Mist tells him they should move on to the third skill. Mist describes the sensation of her third skill, saying she feels like she could fix a lot of things. She thinks she might even be able to fix Shakiro's hair that turned pure white from the elder race. She mentions she could make that flower livelier as an example, and Shakiro asks if that means things like buildings are fixable too. Mist gets emotional as the weight of her abilities sinks in, and Shakiro asks her if that magic is possibly what he thinks it is. The revelation hits. Mist possesses regeneration magic, the legendary magic that holds the potential to regenerate absolutely anything. Her eyes show the clock mechanisms within them as the true scope of her power becomes clear, with imagery of wings and complete restoration manifesting around the explanation. Mist stares at her hands in disbelief, realizing such incredible power exists within her. Shakiro confirms he'd only heard about it before too, never actually seen it himself. She asks if these are all the skills she can use, but Shakiro tells her there are 2 more. He reveals that even the saint can only use 4 skills, but Mist has 5, and every single one of her skills is on par with or greater than the saint's abilities. Shakiro explains that there are very few users of holy magic, so they're usually valued highly by the church. He questions why Mist was persecuted by them if her abilities are so valuable. An image of the skill selection ritual appears, showing the ceremonial orb at the church. Shakiro wonders if that ritual was really legitimate, but then he shakes off the thought and tells Mist her skill is more important right now. He instructs her to try activating her 4th skill, and Mist acknowledges the command. Suddenly, magical energy explodes outward with tremendous force. Shakiro gets blown back by the sheer power as Mist floats in the air with massive ethereal wings manifesting around her, glowing with holy light. She apologizes, explaining it activated the moment she poured in her magic power. Shakiro tells her not to worry about that and observes the manifestation with growing understanding. Mist hovers above with her wings spread wide, an enormous glowing clock mechanism appearing in the sky behind her hand. Shakiro stands below watching the spectacle, and she asks if it seems like their abilities have increased. Shakiro notices it feels like everyone except the two of them has their abilities reduced. He realizes the skill simultaneously weakens enemies while providing a buff to allies, adding +1 to speed, attack, and defense. Shakiro tells her that's incredible. Meanwhile, Mist mentions the mana cost is high so she can't use it many times. Shakiro asks how much mana she used. She says much more than before. He thinks it over and decides it's best saved as a trump card. Then Shakiro suggests they give the skill a name, explaining that magic works more effectively when you name it, maybe because it makes it easier to visualize. He proposes calling it Sanctuary. Mist repeats the name quietly. Shakiro tells her this magic of hers is like their own little sanctuary. Mist thanks him warmly and says it's a lovely name. She even whispers the word sanctuary again to herself with a smile. Shakiro tells her she can give herself whatever name she likes, but Mist insists she likes the name he gave her. Suddenly, though, she notices the sensation of rising has disappeared. Shakiro explains that some skills have lasting effects and some don't. Then a text box pops up explaining how skills work in this world. Passive skills maintain various aptitudes like weapon and body enhancement or elemental magic, while active skills activate when magic power flows through them, like clock creation or sanctuary. Mist processes this information and realizes something important. She figures out that the reason she can use magic is because she has passive skills for holy magic and light magic. Shakiro confirms she's catching on quick, then tells her they should move on to the last skill now. Shakiro tells Mist to try jumping a bit. She leaps and notices her body feels incredibly light. She lands gracefully and Shakiro asks if she understands. But then Mist jumps again, and this time she soars high into the air with her angelic wings manifesting, shooting up way higher than expected. She just floats there surprised while Shakiro watches from the ground below. Shakiro suggests they go into town this afternoon to look at weapons and armor. Meanwhile, Mist addresses him hesitantly and wonders if maybe the skill is for physical enhancement or weapon affinity. She looks at him with hopeful eyes, her face close to his, and asks if he thinks her skill might actually be useful. Shakiro tells her that's more than enough, she has talent that surpasses even a saint. Mist feels relieved and thanks goodness, then politely asks if he could please put her down soon. Suddenly, Shakiro realizes he's been holding her up and apologizes quickly. Shakiro decides they should stop remembering the past. Meanwhile, street voices drift through the air. Someone asks if they should grab lunch, and another person responds with a quick yes. The scene shows their feet walking separately through the ruins, moving in different directions. Someone mutters something about a saint under their breath. Then a caption notes how their paths clearly split back then, heading toward a future completely different from that time. The city comes into view with a peaceful street scene, buildings line the roads and people go about their day like nothing's wrong. Right in the middle of town sits this massive crater or fountain, just dominating the landscape. Mist looks concerned about something, and Shakiro asks if something's wrong as they're experiencing this peaceful scene in the city. Shakiro asks Mist if she wants to eat some. She immediately refuses, but Shakiro just laughs and tells her she doesn't have to hold back. The scene cuts to Mist eating skewered meat from a street vendor stall. She bites into the food enthusiastically, chewing with visible enjoyment written all over her face. A small inset shows the cooked meat on the skewer looking pretty damn good. Shakiro watches and comments that it's good. Mist confirms between bites that it's delicious. The two walk together through the town streets after that. Shakiro feels content just watching Mist from behind. He thinks to himself that he somehow feels happy too, and if Mist looks happy then that's enough for him. But then Mist suddenly notices something and accuses him of sneaking up on her unfairly. She addresses him as master with this concerned expression on her face. Meanwhile, townspeople on the street start discussing the saint from the capital. Someone mentions they heard she started training to fight the demon lord's army. A view of the grand cathedral with its tower stands prominently among trees, looking all majestic and stuff. Shakiro overhears this and wonders if Maria might stop by this town someday. Someone asks if he heard about the saint. The conversation continues about the saint of the royal capital. Turns out she's his former fiancée who used holy magic. Shakiro just acknowledges that was a long time ago, like it's ancient history now. Shakiro thanks Mist, then manifests this massive, ornate clock mechanism with his clock user ability, basically showing off the skill to her. Mist reacts with total amazement, recognizing his ability is called clock user. But then Shakiro reflects on something darker. People don't trust someone with such a strange skill as clock user the way Mist does. Because of this skill, his engagement was actually called off. A silhouette panel shows three figures from his past, representing the rejection he faced. The narration trails off, noting that Maria also did something. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to the royal capital, showing the exterior of this grand cathedral with its distinctive towers and architecture. Inside the massive structure, light streams through tall Gothic windows, creating these dramatic beams of illumination across the ornate interior. Down in the lower nave, Maria kneels in prayer wearing her white saint robes and veil. Suddenly, Shakiro's voice echoes her name across the distance. Later, Maria speaks with Lord Raven in the cathedral. She tells him he did his best about his childhood friend. Lord Raven responds, saying he'll do his best for her sake too so she can smile like before. Maria prays silently afterward, wishing Lord Raven would come back soon from the expedition. She thinks his name with concern. But suddenly someone calls out urgently that there's trouble. Maria turns, startled, and asks what the matter is. The scene ends with her alarmed reaction to the emergency. Then someone reports to Maria that it has come to light one of the saint's assistants was engaged in misconduct. Maria asks what kind of misconduct. The person confirms they'll explain in more detail. The aide describes how the assistant not only swindled the saint herself out of her compensation and activity funds, but even embezzled the personal donations Maria had been making. This was something that should never happen. The explanation continues as Maria learns the assistant also handled remittances and letters she had entrusted to him for Cyclo. Ornate coins and sealed letters are shown scattered about. Maria reacts with total shock. The revelation hits Maria hard. She realizes Cyclo really never received the money or letters she sent. In a flashback to the trial, someone demanded to know what she was talking about regarding letters and remittances. The voice accused her of calling the church liars when they had hoped Cyclo would honestly admit his guilt and reflect on it. Maria remembers this happened the day before the trial. Shakiro's voice echoes her name from that memory. Back in the present, someone asks if Lady Saint is alright as Maria groans. The narrator notes the truth is something Maria didn't want to hear. In another flashback, someone shows up and informs Maria that her ex-fiancé just got arrested on suspicion of serial rape. Maria reacts with total confusion, and the person tells her to calm down, but Maria exclaims that this has to be some kind of mistake. There's no way Shakiro would do that. The person explains there's no mistake about it. Maria reflects on how she really believed in Shakiro, trusted him completely. Then the informant asks if she's been sending him money all this time. Apparently, the assistant had been embezzling the cash for his own twisted desires. Maria places her hand over her chest in distress, the weight of it all hitting her at once. In the same memory, Lord Raven pulls Maria close and holds her, telling his sweet Maria that even though she still believed in Shakiro, it's okay because he's with her now. Lord Raven suggests they head to court the next day to find out the truth, and Maria quietly agrees. Back in the present, Maria's sitting there holding a stuffed cat, wondering to herself whether Lady Raven tried to set up Cyclo. She wants to believe his kindness wasn't a lie. In the background of her thoughts, the memory of Lord Raven standing with her lingers. A few days pass, and the narration notes that thanks are being given for Lord Raven's hard work on the expedition to the frontier. Lord Raven tells Maria that once her training is over, they can go together next time. Maria thanks him quietly. Then someone calls her name. Maria states she heard that her former aide was embezzling funds, and she confronts Lord Raven, pointing out that he still told everyone Cyclo was handing out money to outlaws even knowing this. Cyclo never received the money. Maria demands to know why he would give that kind of testimony to her, why he'd lie like that. Lord Raven looks down at Maria with this mocking smile and tells her she's just realizing it now, calling her such a fool. Maria's eye is shown in close-up with the clock mechanism visible in her iris as the weight of his betrayal sinks in, the truth finally crashing down on her. Lord Raven continues his confession, explaining how that officer asked him to frame Cyclo Owen for a crime he didn't even commit. Then he adds that he couldn't get Maria because of Cyclo either. He goes on about how the public are complete idiots too, saying just because he's the Duke's heir and some so-called hero, they'll believe literally anything. Meanwhile, Maria processes the horror of his words, realizing this man is not a hero at all. Suddenly, Maria snaps and grabs Lord Raven, screaming that he's just a scumbag. They struggle physically as Lord Raven tells her that ruining people is like a game to him. He demands she let go of him and asks where she thinks she's going, threatening to expose her crimes if she tries anything. Maria stares at him from under her veil with tears in her eyes and tells him she will never forgive him. But Lord Raven restrains her and laughs, saying she still doesn't get it. He tells her he loves that holy saint face of hers as Maria reacts in shock and disgust. Lord Raven grabs Maria's face and tells her she's already an accomplice too. Then a memory flashes through Maria's mind, young Shakiro smiling brightly as he wished her a happy birthday and gave her a present. The image of Shakiro's eye with its clock mechanism appears, reminding her of what she's lost. In a memory or vision, adult Shakiro's face appears calm as he swears he'll come for Maria. Below that, his anguished younger self calls out her name, asking why. Back in the present, Maria sits alone in distress, knowing she's the one who drove that precious person into hell. Maria stares upward with tears in her eyes, realizing something crucial. She's the same. Lord Raven is just like this terrible man. Meanwhile, in the scene below, Lord Raven grins at her and tells her a partner in crime should act like one, asking if she understands before demanding she do as he says. Then there's this figure in a black dress standing alone in an ornate room, the silence heavy around her. Outside under the clouds, someone's thinking to themselves that she should be getting along just fine with that guy who has the hero skill. The scene shifts to Shakiro and Maria sitting together in a peaceful outdoor setting with falling leaves around them. Shakiro admits that it's strange, but he can't bring himself to hate them, though he just figured they'd probably never meet again and that's all. Maria looks at him emotionally and tells him that must have been very painful for him. But Shakiro explains that because Mist looks so happy, he feels like he's being rewarded too, and right now he's happy. Maria closes her eyes peacefully for a moment, then opens them again. As she starts to walk away, Shakiro suddenly calls out asking if she's Mist. Mist's face fills the panel with a genuine happy smile. She tells Shakiro that if that's the case, she'll gladly let him make her happy, and that she'll end up receiving so much happiness from him as her master. The scene shifts to the street, where Shakiro enthusiastically tells her to take as many weapons as she wants and not to hold back. Mist agrees excitedly and suggests they go check out some weapons together. The caption notes this is happiness born from mutual trust. In the peaceful city near Salon Kitsune, Mist emerges in her new battle outfit, a stunning white dress with black accents and ornate details. She's holding an elegant staff and nervously asks Shakiro how it looks on her. Someone nearby reacts with total surprise at her appearance. Meanwhile, outside on the street, people start complimenting Mist on her new adventurer look, telling her that no matter how she dresses, she's a fine adventurer and looks cute. Shakiro walks beside her and responds that it's good to hear. Then Shakiro asks Mist how the staff she bought feels to use. Mist replies happily that she thinks she can handle both magic and staff techniques pretty well. Someone's watching them from nearby with a completely shocked expression on their face. Later on, Mist asks the Grand Couturier if he used to admire adventurers too. The craftsman confirms that it seems so, then comments that Shakiro looks happy. The Grand Couturier explains that his admiration for adventurers is a story from his childhood. He gave up on becoming an adventurer when he received his craftsman's skill. Mist listens quietly as he recalls his younger days when he eagerly studied books about adventurers. Afterward, Shakiro and Mist walk through the city together. Mist mentions that the craftsman seemed a little lonely. But then the Grand Couturier calls out to them, saying that both of them should have a great adventure for his sake as well. Mist asks Shakiro if he had a dream too, and Shakiro responds that even if someone can do their best work thanks to professional skills, it's still pretty lonely if the dream doesn't come true. Mist looks at him with understanding. Then Shakiro tells her with a slight smile that he'll let her know when it looks like his dream might come true. The scene shifts to the Adventurers Guild building, where a guild staff member welcomes them and asks what they can do for Lord Ciclo. Shakiro tells the staff member that he'd like to register Mist as an adventurer. Mist stands beside him looking nervous as hell. The guild staff member acknowledges the request and hands over a registration form, asking them to fill out the required information. Shakiro begins filling out the form, but when he reaches the skill section, he pauses briefly before writing down Mist information. The form shows her name as Mist Carmine with her status listed as slave. Someone at the guild notices the skill entry and suddenly exclaims in shock, "It's heretic." The reaction spreads like wildfire through the guild as everyone realizes what Mist's skill actually is. The atmosphere grows tense as Lord Raven and other armored figures appear on the scene. Then, an imposing armored figure demands to know if it's true if her skill is really called cultist. Meanwhile, other guild members start backing away, saying they don't want to get anywhere near her. Mist just stands there with tears forming in her eyes, clearly distressed by the hostile reaction from everyone around her. Shakiro's expression hardens with determination as he faces the situation. Lord Raven stands before them in his full armored glory, his presence commanding and intimidating as hell. Shakiro confronts him directly, demanding to know who he is and what the hell he wants with Mist. The armored figure responds by pointing to the crest on his chest, asking if Shakiro can't even see it. Shakiro's eyes narrow as he studies the man standing before him. He acknowledges that Mist's skill is indeed cultist, then challenges the armored figure by asking what of it like he couldn't care less about whatever title this guy's throwing around. The man seems completely taken aback by the response, and Shakiro adds dismissively that he's never even heard of whatever authority that fancy crest is supposed to represent. Then Shakiro calls out that this Lord Raven looks like some country bumpkin who doesn't even know his name. But Lord Raven accepts the challenge without hesitation and says he'll take him up on that fight. He tells Shakiro to step outside so he can teach him some manners, Pretty much the classic, let's take this outside moment. Someone tries to tell them to hold on, but suddenly the guild master Guanoyej cuts in and declares that as guild master, he'll take charge of this whole situation. Guanoyej tells the country bumpkin to follow him and that they'll settle this at the training grounds. Meanwhile, Shakiro responds that it sounds interesting, basically ready to throw down wherever. The mysterious noble woman from earlier watches the whole thing with amusement, thinking that Shakiro claims to be high rank, but that bumpkin is at best C rank. She figures they should just let him embarrass himself in front of all the other adventurers. Someone from the crowd explains that the Holy Knight only just got back from a long expedition the other day, so it's no wonder Shakiro didn't know about him. Then they reveal the armored figure is Reinhardt the Instant Saint, bearer of the job skill spear. Saint the guy's a holy knight of the church and also an S-rank adventurer. Meanwhile, nearby townspeople start asking who that guy challenging him even is anyway, saying he seemed like some wannabe celebrity trying to make a name for himself. But Shakiro just thinks to himself that yes, he has faith. The three of them walk into the training arena with the crowd watching from all sides. The spectators start cheering for Lord Reinhardt to take that guy down already and go for it. They figure whoever Shakiro is, he'll be wiped out in a flash by the Flash Saint. Pretty reckless move on his part. Lord Reinhardt calls out to the country bumpkin, telling him he's late. Shakiro apologizes and says he's just a country bumpkin who doesn't know the way, asking for forgiveness with a humble tone. Lord Leithart declares that in fact, he doesn't even acknowledge Shakiro as human. The rules get announced. Registration of that heretic as an adventurer is denied, and the match will be decided by either surrender or incapacitation. As for the winner's demand, Lord Leithart states that Shakiro is never to get involved with Mist again. Shakiro's eye narrows as he processes this threat. The match begins, and Lord Leithart immediately launches into a devastating barrage attack with his spear, screaming out as he strikes. He thinks to himself that it's impossible for Shakiro to evade his attack, though since this is a duel, he'll avoid striking vital points. But then Reinhardt unleashes his devastating spear barrage with blinding speed, the attacks creating massive trails of motion as he strikes. Somehow though Shakiro evades the entire onslaught, his clock mechanisms gleaming as he moves. The exhausted fighter lets out a breath of relief while Reinhardt lies defeated on the ground below. The counterattack connected Shakiro's movement was just too fast to follow. Reinhardt's face shows pure shock as energy crackles around him, the realization of what just happened hitting him all at once. Then the announcement comes, it's over. The finishing blow lands with devastating force. Shakiro's strike sends Reinhardt flying backward, the impact shattering through the arena as the ground literally explodes from the sheer power of the attack. Reinhardt just lies there with his ornate armor cracked and broken, but somehow the guy's still grinning despite the defeat. Meanwhile, the crowd stares in complete shock at what they just witnessed. Then the official announcement echoes across the arena. The winner is Cyclo Owen. The spectators erupt in amazement. People in the crowd are freaking out, asking what just happened and saying they couldn't even see Shakiro move. Someone yells about how ridiculously strong he is. Mist runs toward him calling out to her master, and Shakiro just stands there thinking he won just as he promised. Down below, Guanoyej addresses the crowd, telling everyone they can see for themselves that Cyclo Owen is strong. Someone near the guild master agrees that it's exactly what they expected, and then Guanoyej continues his announcement. Guanoyej declares that this very man, Cyclo Owen, deserves recognition. He tells the crowd he hopes no idiot ever again messes with Shakiro's party members just because of some skill. The announcement continues as Shakiro and Mist walk away from the arena with the crowd watching. Then the guild master proclaims that Shakiro is the first adventurer in history to explore and return from the depths of the deep hole. He's recognized as SSS rank, a great man. The gathered adventurers just stare in shock and awe at this revelation. The crowd erupts in shock and disbelief. Someone yells about how SSS rank is unbelievable and they thought it was just a legend. Shakiro stands there with Guanoyej and Mist as the announcement sinks in. Other adventurers celebrate, calling it the birth of the strongest adventurer Cyclo. The gathered crowd cheers for hero Cyclo, telling him how cool he looks. Down below, Mist questions the guild master, asking if the old man egged Fiancée on just for this. Guanoyej responds that who knows, but as a guild, it's a problem if adventurers backed by the church start acting all high and mighty. Mist gets grabbed and someone says anyway. Then Shakiro complains that it's just way too noisy to bear. He announces he's getting out of here as Reinhardt leaps away in the background. Shakiro takes off at incredible speed, and an observer notes how fast he is. Another person comments that he's already out of sight. The scene shifts to a quieter area overlooking the town. Shakiro thinks they've come this far so they should be all right now. He apologizes to Mist, telling her it looks like her adventure debut will have to wait until tomorrow. Mist responds hesitantly that it's fine. The perspective shifts to show Mist's embarrassed face as she tells him when he does something like this, she'd at least like him to tell her beforehand. She notes his face is still so close, and it's really embarrassing. Shakiro agrees and admits that's his bad. But Mist continues, saying it's just her heart is racing so she kind of wanted a bit of time to prepare herself. Shakiro quickly clarifies no, it's not that. Mist reacts with surprise. Suddenly, a voice calls out to the two lovebirds over there. A mysterious woman with elaborate hair decorations and fur-trimmed outfit leans over a garden wall, asking how about having a chat with her. The woman introduces herself as Karim Elementius. She explains that the holy fighter Shakiro beat was teamed up with her, and she's an S-rank adventurer, just so he knows. Mist asks if Karim took him down and was watching the duel. Karim acknowledges this, noting that for Shakiro to keep up with her speed is impressive. She looks at him with a slight smile, wondering what this guy wants. Karim stands there in her full adventurer outfit. Shakiro addresses her, confirming her name is Karim. He asks why she followed them. His tone becomes more serious as he adds that depending on her objective, there will be consequences. The panel shows a close-up of a blade and Shakiro's stern expression. Karim calls out to them to wait a second. Hold on, she insists she's not their enemy. Karim explains she only has one reason for being here. Shakiro tells her he'll be the judge of whether she's an enemy and demands to know why she followed them. Karim agrees and says she gets it. Standing before them, Karim declares she wants them to let her join their party. Shakiro reacts with confusion, asking why though, pointing out that Karim was one of that Shunt's guy's friends. Karim confirms that yeah, Reinhardt was that idiot's buddy and that's why they asked him. She explains there was only one guy whose skill matched theirs, so they had no choice but to team up with him. Reinhardt pissed her off, but she still ended up forming a party with him. Karim adds that the way Reinhardt treated that young lady there made her completely lose all respect for him. Shakiro observes that it doesn't look like Karim is lying. The scene flashes back to Reinhardt yelling about denying registration of that heretic as an adventurer and not even acknowledging Mist as human. Karim explains she's got a special profession skill herself, one she can't tell anyone about. That's why she can't stand people who discriminate just because of skills. Karim tells Shakiro he really let them have it and it felt damn refreshing. But Karim quickly adds she didn't come here just to say thanks. Shakiro responds that's nice and starts to leave. Karim gets worked up, telling him to just spit it out already and asking if he wants to know. She asks about his goal. Karim declares she's in love with the way Shakiro thinks and how strong he is. She wants to form a party with him, and it even ties into her own goal. Shakiro points out that Mist hasn't even registered as an adventurer yet. He suggests they talk it over properly at the guild tomorrow. Shakiro tells Karim he's expecting a good answer and she agrees. Mist looks troubled and Shakiro asks what's wrong. Mist thinks back to how that person called her by her name instead of calling her heretic. Then the next day arrives. Shakiro muses that Karim doesn't seem like a bad person though. Shakiro and Mist arrive at what looks like the guild or some kind of formal location. Deimos bows deeply before them, addressing Lord Cyclo and his companions. Then she apologizes profusely, saying she's truly deeply sorry. Deimos tells them she'll accept whatever punishment Shakiro deems fit. Shakiro notes she's talking about yesterday. Meanwhile, people in the background react with shock, realizing they're heretics. Karim asks how Mist is doing. Mist tells Karim not to worry, she's fine. Karim mentions that's what they said. Then Mist touches her chest and explains her master will protect her, which is why she's okay. She thanks Karim sincerely for the concern. Suddenly, from the upper floor of the guild building, someone calls out to Cyclo and Mist, saying they'd like to rent a room to talk. Karim leans over the railing excitedly, saying she's been waiting for them. Inside the ornate multi-level guild building, a guild member asks if they were one of Lord Karim's companions and tells another staff member to show them around. As Shakiro and Mist walk through the impressive space, other adventurers whisper among themselves. Someone asks what kind of person Karim actually is, while others comment that SSS rank really is something else, marveling that they actually know Karim. Then Karim speaks up, mentioning someone who's said to rival the great sage of the royal capital and is famous as a genius, calling him truly an amazing adventurer. Shakiro realizes the great sage being mentioned refers to Alice. His mind flashes back to the guild master's words about how his brother was called a hopeless incompetent by the great sage himself. Shakiro thinks to himself that someday he and Alice might meet. Mist notices something is wrong and calls out to her master. Shakiro wonders if he'll be able to stay calm when that time comes. Mist looks up at Shakiro with concern and asks if he's really okay. Shakiro apologizes and tells Mist he's fine, adding that he needs to focus on his discussion with Karim right now. Shakiro approaches the door, which has an ornate clock mechanism handle, and announces he's coming in. Inside the room, Karim has prepared an entire feast spread across the table. She cheerfully tells them to eat as much as they like and that it's all on her. Shakiro and Mist react with complete shock at the excessive hospitality, and Shakiro points out they're not here to party. Karim agrees and says she gets it. They should get started, though she suggests they loosen up a bit first. The narration notes these mysterious adventurers are full of secrets. The scene cuts to an overhead view of the three gathered in the private room. Karim asks if they know about Elise and what her secret is, then she clarifies she means that desert country far away. Shakiro confirms that's right. Karim explains that she's from Elise and working as an adventurer here because of a family custom. Shakiro asks if that's the reason she mentioned yesterday, and Karim starts to explain her goal, but gets distracted when Mist enjoys the food. Someone comments that Karim was being so secretive about it before, impressed she remembered. Then Karim reveals her goal is to bear the child of a strong man. The statement leaves both Shakiro and Mist completely stunned. Shakiro asks what that's supposed to mean, but Karim gets frustrated at his denseness and bluntly tells him she wants to join the party because she wants to make babies with him. Mist immediately protests in panic. Karim clarifies that she really does want to form a party with him and asks what he thinks. Someone nearby protests about wanting a baby for such a loveless reason, but Shakiro acknowledges her point and says he'll be upfront about something first. He states he doesn't trust anyone but Mist, so he'll only team up with Karim if there's a benefit for him. Karim explains there are 3 advantages to having her in the party. First is her experience as an adventurer. She points out that neither Shakiro nor Mist have much experience as adventurers, and offers to teach them all the essential adventure skills from A to Z. The second point is party balance. As things stand, Shakiro would have to fight while constantly protecting Mist, which isn't a balanced party setup. Shakiro agrees, noting that both he and Mist have skills better suited for the rear guard, and they need a frontliner to draw the enemy's attention. Shakiro asks what the third advantage is. Karim reveals she has a swordsman-type job skill, so if she joins the party as a frontliner, everything will work out. Shakiro admits it's not bad but still missing a decisive factor. Then Karim explains the third reason isn't really for the party, but for Mist. She reminds him that Mist's cultist skill got exposed to everyone during the duel the other day. The guild master warned them, but his warning only works on a small number of people. Karim continues explaining that now Mist is going to be exposed to hostility everywhere. Shakiro asks what that has to do with anything. The scene shows the heraldic shield of Heinberg with hands reaching toward a crescent moon, and thanks to the skill selection church, the citizens are all strict toward heresy. Back at the restaurant, Karim points out that Mist is a girl and Shakiro can't be with her all the time. She offers to go with Mist everywhere. Shakiro questions if she's actually a trustworthy guard. Karim tells him she's counting on him. Karim speaks with conviction about how being discriminated against just because of one's job skills is something that should never happen. She wants to protect that too. Mist and Shakiro both look at her as she makes this declaration. Then Mist calls out to Shakiro, addressing him as master. Shakiro hesitantly says he thinks it's okay to trust Karim, then asks Mist if it's okay, noting that she used to be so afraid of others. Mist explains that she's a heretic, but even so she wants to believe in someone who can be kind to someone like her, and it's because Shakiro cherishes her that she can feel that way. Shakiro thinks that if Mist says so, he'll accept it. Karim gets excited and declares it's settled then, but Shakiro immediately corrects himself, saying he still doesn't trust Karim. That's why he'll be testing her. In a darker tone, Shakiro tells Karim to show him her strength, enough to prove she's worthy to be his comrade. Karim responds that she'll test his worth as a comrade, as long as she can see how well he handles himself against her, that's enough. But Shakiro protests that even if she tells him to beat her, that's just impossible. Then Karim extends her hand and says she'll expect him to have the strength worthy of an S rank. They shake hands as Karim tells him to leave it to her. The scene cuts to some action with objects breaking all over the place, then reveals they're at Lord's Manor near the graceful brush. Karim's face appears with a smile. Meanwhile, inside the manor, Shakiro is working away at a desk. Mist asks if he wants to take a break. Back at the manor desk, Shakiro works on blueprint designs while Karim approaches, asking what he's working on. Karim reminds him about his mock battle with Callum tomorrow. Shakiro explains he was making a blueprint for a magic tool. Mist looks on with wide, curious eyes. In a flashback, young Shakiro mentions he was called a genius when he was a kid. Young Mist responds excitedly about how amazing it is that he's making a magic tool blueprint. Shakiro reflects that it was fun being able to really get absorbed in something again as he works on the mechanical drawings. Shakiro continues his thoughts about always loving mysterious, wonder-filled magic tools. The panel shows an intricate spherical mechanism with gears and magic stones. He explains how these tools can use nothing but gears or magic stones to pull off feats like a great sorcerer would. Mist responds that he truly enjoys making magic tools. Shakiro reveals his dream was to become a first-rate magic tool craftsman. He reflects that even after gaining the clockworker skill, his fascination with anything mechanical never changed. That's when he thought about fusing his skill with magic tool crafting. The blueprint turns out to be for a weapon. Shakiro asks Mist if she knows what a gun is. She admits she doesn't know what a gun is. So he explains it's a magical tool that uses explosive force to propel a lump of metal at high speed. Even a novice can produce power comparable to basic magic with guns, and they're hard to dodge. But after people with advanced combat skills appeared, guns became useless and fell out of use. Then Shakiro declares that if he's the one making it, that changes everything. Mechanical gears and components begin manifesting around him. Mist watches as Shakiro activates clock creation. The magical circles and clockwork patterns fill the space with brilliant light. The gun materializes in a spectacular display, an ornate weapon covered in decorative engravings and intricate craftsmanship. Geometric clock face designs spin in the background as the creation completes. Mist stares at the finished weapon with complete amazement. Then Shakiro holds up the completed gun and names it Mistletoe, explaining it's an anti-monster gun enhanced by his timekeeper skill. The material's an orichalcum alloy, and this thing can fire not only regular bullets but also magic rounds, with bullet speed far beyond anything a conventional gun could ever manage. He notes it's powerful enough to rival advanced magic, so it should be more than capable of fighting monsters in the deep hole's deeper layers. The panel shows the gun's devastating power against monsters. Suddenly, Shakiro notices something and calls out to Mist. Mist asks if Shakiro can really just pull out a magical tool from nothing, and Karim confirms that yeah, that's right. She mentions he did it in an instant, though she notes he needs to have the blueprint firmly locked in his head. Mist's eyes go wide with amazement and she praises him, saying he's way too amazing. Then Mist declares that he's the strongest, that he possesses power equal to a god. But someone pleads with Shakiro not to show off so easily in front of strangers, and Shakiro agrees to tone it down. Meanwhile, Karim tells them not to stay up too late, deciding she'll give it one more push with her work. Mist calls out to Shakiro, her voice hesitant and uncertain. Meanwhile, Karim starts walking away, asking if Shakiro had a dream too, then mentions she'll let him know if it looks like it'll come true. Mist tells him she was happy to hear his stories, and Karim asks if she can hear more sometime. Shakiro tells Mist that of course she can hear more stories whenever she wants. Mist looks up at him with this emotional expression on her face, her eyes completely reflecting everything she's feeling in that moment. Then Mist wishes Shakiro good night, and he responds with his own good night as he takes a drink of something. The scene shifts to an exterior night shot of the building with a tree silhouetted against the evening sky. Then the next day arrives. At the Adventurers Guild training grounds, Karim comments on how Shakiro made such a huge bear, referring to the stuffed toy he created. Karim teases Shakiro about not being able to sleep, saying he's like a kid all excited for a field trip. Shakiro tells her to shut up, but Karim warns him that just because he's sleep-deprived doesn't mean she'll go easy on him. Shakiro tells her to go ahead and come at him for real. The mock battle begins, and Karim moves into position with incredible speed and agility. She takes a combat stance with her massive weapon and shield ready, movements fluid and precise despite the size of her equipment. Then Shakiro draws his ornate gun Mistletoe magical clock circles, manifesting around the weapon as he declares it's time to get started. The mock battle intensifies as Karim launches a devastating aerial attack, her massive weapon crashing down toward Shakiro with explosive force. The impact sends debris flying while she closes the distance with overwhelming speed. Karim taunts him with a confident grin, asking if he really thinks he can mess with her, mocking his weapon choice and questioning why he's using a gun in this day and age. But before the fight began, Shakiro had explained the setup to Mist. The Mistletoe he's generating for this exercise has its power adjusted, and he notes that for an S-rank level adventurer, it comes down to whether they can dodge a bullet or not. Shakiro tells Mist that if things go south, he'll be counting on her for healing. The narration throws out this question, which is gonna reach first, a bullet or a blade? Meanwhile, Mist watches anxiously, silently pleading for both Master Karim and Shakiro to make it out safe. The battle tears across the training grounds, and Karim's starting to notice something. Shakiro's skill is way beyond what she expected. She realizes the guy's actually predicting her line of sight, her movements, even the direction of her gun, then dodging based on all of that. The combat keeps going with both fighters absolutely pushing their limits. Then suddenly, Shakiro manifests a second pistol, casually declaring that one more won't be a problem. Karim's eyes go wide with shock as she sees the dual guns. She starts protesting about him using two at once while getting knocked back. Shakiro taunts her, asking what's wrong, but Karim realizes at this rate she's done for. She knows that if it were an ordinary gun, she could just rush in once it ran out of ammo. The problem is Cyclo's gun is created by a skill, so running out of bullets just isn't gonna happen. She decides she's got no choice left, it's time to go all in. Karim charges forward with her massive shield in a desperate power move, and Shakiro reacts with surprise to the sudden aggressive push. Meanwhile, Mist calls out Karim's name in concern as the S-rank adventurer goes on the offensive. Karim yells at Shakiro, asking what he's aiming for and if he's lost his mind. A hexagonal interface display shows his ammunition status as he keeps firing. Then Shakiro yells back at her to come on, pushing his assault with both pistols blazing. The gunfire knocks Karim back across the training grounds. But Karim charges forward again with her massive shield raised, declaring she'll take the hit head-on. Shakiro reacts with surprise to her sudden aggressive defensive move as she rushes him with the shield. The shield bash connects, and the aftermath shows Karim wrapped in her fur-trimmed outfit. She comments that it didn't work out as she'd hoped, with dramatic motion lines emphasizing the force behind her failed attack. Then the announcement comes that the match is decided. Both fighters stand in their final positions with Karim holding her massive weapon, while Shakiro has both guns trained on her in a standoff pose. After the match, Karim admits that even with Shakiro holding back, she still couldn't win. Shakiro tells her it wasn't bad at all, actually better than he expected. Someone asks what that means, and then Shakiro confirms she passed. An excited reaction follows. Shakiro then tells Karim that from here on, he'll be counting on her. Karim extends her hand to Shakiro, greeting him properly and saying it's nice to meet him. But then she realizes she forgot something important. Getting intimate, Karim tells Cyclo he can fill her with his seed as much as he likes. And when he can't hold back anymore, he can just take her anytime he wants. After what Karim just told him, Shakiro stands there in complete shock. Karim laughs, telling Cyclo he's such an innocent one. Meanwhile, Mist calls out asking what Karim said to their master. Karim just smiles and says it's a secret between the two of them. Shakiro quickly tries to move things along and suggests they go register the party right away. At the Adventurers Guild office, the staff member confirms their party roster. Sir Cyclo Owen, Miss Mist Carmine, and Mr. Karim Elementius as 3 members total, then asks what their party name will be. The 3 party members stand together against a dramatic backdrop of clockwork gears. Shakiro declares their party name as the Wheel of Fate. Someone repeats the name questioningly, Wheel of Fate. Mist says it's a great name and thanks him, explaining she thought it was a party born from a fateful meeting triggered by their master. Shakiro immediately rejects another suggestion. Karim protests that her lovey-dovey Zuckion Love Nest party was actually a pretty solid name. Mist quietly contemplates the word fate. The scene transitions outside the guild building. Shakiro mentions first of all they need a plan. Karim asks what they're gonna do from here, and Mist agrees that's the right question. Shakiro explains that Mist should start by gaining some combat experience, so they'll go after the weaker monsters around North Folia. Mist and Karim both respond enthusiastically. They've got it and they'll do their best. Then Karim suggests that if it's just some light leveling, they can finish up easy today and celebrate forming their party with a bang. But Mist completely misunderstands and panics, asking Cyclo if by more than that he means right away with her body. Shakiro quickly clarifies that's not what he meant at all. Karim calmly states she'll join them for a meal, but that's all, walking alongside them as they head out. Meanwhile, they approach the walls of North Folia and pass through the gate. Shakiro reflects on how whenever he passed through that gate before, he was always alone, but now things are different. Karim calls out to him, saying Mist is waiting too, so they should hurry up and go. Mist notices his contemplative expression and asks if something is wrong. Shakiro processes the realization that he now has comrades. The 3 of them walk together through the courtyard in formation. Suddenly, from somewhere in the distance, a voice calls out asking about their big brother. From behind, Shakiro walks away along the street. Then a girl in a striped outfit charges toward him at full speed, her twin tails flying behind her. Shakiro's expression shifts as he senses something approaching. The girl's face comes into view, tears streaming down her cheeks as she calls out to him. In the distance, the 2 figures stand apart on the cobblestone street. She asks if it's really her big brother. Shakiro questions why she's even there in the first place. The girl yells out for her big brother, charging forward with desperate energy like nothing else matters. But Shakiro states coldly that he never wanted to see her again, not now, not ever. As she continues rushing toward him, he commands her to stay back. Then Shakiro directly asks why Alice is here, demanding an answer. Alice explains that they told her he was sent to North Folia for a crime he didn't commit, that the whole thing was a setup. She continues, saying they also told her he was dead, gone, just like that. When she heard her hopeless big brother needed saving, she came to help him, though she insists she wasn't worried or anything, playing it off like usual. Tears start falling as she admits she just couldn't believe it at first, couldn't accept it. She tells him she's been waiting for him all this time in that town, never giving up. Her voice cracks as she says she's just so glad he's alive, that her big brother is really alive. Alice's emotions overflow as she screams at him through her tears, everything pouring out at once. She yells that for someone who's such a useless and worthless brother, he couldn't even just die properly. Shakiro responds bitterly, apologizing for being alive then, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He turns away and fires back, telling her not to play dumb and asking if she wasn't the one who went around calling him useless and worthless in the first place. Alice's expression shifts to shock as she calls out asking what he means, completely blindsided. Suddenly, Guanoyed's voice echoes in Shakiro's memory, telling him that his sister herself has said it many times over and over again. The thing is, among adventurers, it's well known that the great sage Alice Owen has a useless good-for-nothing older brother. Shakiro reflects that he could never forget Alice's words, no matter how hard he tried. Even after being abused by adventurers and thrown into the deep hole, left for dead, he came to a realization about Alice. The final truth settles over him like a weight, that even his precious family had betrayed him. Alice cries out asking what Shakiro is saying, insisting she would never do something like that it's all wrong. But Shakiro's face twists with disgust and anger as he tells her that just looking at her makes him sick to his stomach. He orders her not to come any closer, his voice sharp and final. A tear falls from Alice's eye. Shakiro walks away with his back turned to Alice, and she collapses to the ground, sobbing and hiccuping as she asks why things turned out this way. She lets out a desperate wail as she hits the cobblestones, completely breaking down while Shakiro just continues walking away without looking back. Meanwhile, Mist and Karim stand together watching the whole scene unfold. Mist softly calls out to Shakiro, and close-up panels show the emotional weight of the moment on both Karim and Shakiro's faces. Then Karim speaks up, telling Shakiro she doesn't understand how things ended up like this, but no matter what choice he makes, she'll always be on his side. The scene shifts to show an aerial view of a courtyard or a state building. But Alice says through her pain that she finally got to see him again. Shakiro stands at a distance as Alice asks how things ended up like this, and the scene flashes back 2 months earlier, showing a building exterior. A close-up reveals Alice holding a pendant with an ornate A initial as she thinks about her big brother. The flashback continues 2 months earlier, where Alice is holding the pendant with that ornate A design, and she's thinking about how she wants to see him just one more time. Then the memory shifts back even further to a younger Alice receiving the charm. Shakiro tells her happy birthday and that he made this charm specifically for her. Alice looks at it and calls him Big Brother, and Shakiro explains he made it because she's always been a bit reckless. Alice's thoughts continue as she fights through the wilderness, remembering how her big brother was always so kind to her, and how she thought she could do anything for him. Meanwhile, the scene shows her battling these massive wolf-like monsters in absolutely brutal combat. After defeating them, she just stands there alone in her adventurer gear, processing everything that's happened. The memory shifts again, showing young Alice embracing Shakiro from behind and telling him she loves him. Her face appears determined and emotional as she promises to do her best. Back in the present timeline, someone congratulates Lady Alice on her first subjugation. She's standing right next to the corpse of this massive A-rank monster that literally no one else had been able to defeat. But Alice just brushes it off, saying it was no big deal as expected of a sage. She instructs them to make sure half the reward gets sent to her big brother. Then a party member questions whether Alice is sure about sending so much money, pointing out it's a fortune, and she's the one who actually did the work. Alice explains her big brother has a totally useless job skill, so it's fine though she thinks to herself that if she doesn't work hard, they won't even be able to survive. Meanwhile, townspeople are gossiping about the whole situation, talking about the special A-rank monster, and how Alice's reputation as a sage just keeps growing. But the rumors get darker as people start saying that having a job skill but needing his sister to support him is impossible, concluding that Alice's brother must be an utter piece of trash. Shakiro overhears some of this. Alice keeps dismissing everyone's concerns, saying that since her big brother is a total loser with a trash skill, she's the one who has to work hard, but honestly, it's really no big deal. Meanwhile, the rumors about Cyclo spread throughout the entire town, with people comparing him unfavorably to his sister and straight up calling him incompetent. An aerial view shows the estate grounds as Alice thinks about her big brother. She stands there in her full adventurer gear, completely consumed by guilt. She thinks about how she did something terrible to her big brother. She knows she has to apologize and make him forgive her, but she has absolutely no idea what she should actually do. In the distance, a small figure of Shakiro walks away from her. Shakiro glances to the side as Alice sits on the ground in a shadowed, distressed state. Then Karim approaches from behind and asks what Alice is gonna do about Cyclo. Shakiro tells them to get going, adding that they're going to practice party coordination nearby as planned. Karim says she sees and tells them to get going. Alice responds quietly. The scene shifts to a wide open grassland under a cloudy sky, and Karim announces that Professor Callum's class for beginner adventurers is starting. Karim tells Shakiro she's looking forward to working with him. Shakiro acknowledges. Alice asks if he noticed anything else from the surroundings. Karim praises him for a good answer. Looking out at the grassland, Karim explains that the fact there aren't even any normal animal trails means there are no large monsters around. She notes that's valuable information in itself. Someone comments it just looks like a normal grassland to them. Suddenly, a bunny appears in the grass. Karim points out that they mustn't overlook small animals like these, then adds however with a trailing tone. Karim mentions they can be used for food or as monster bait, and Alice says she understands. Then someone asks if that means Karim also noticed that other thing, right as Karim activates clockwork creation and summons Mistletoe. The massive weapon fires across the grassland in a devastating blast. The attack strikes a massive serpent creature that was approaching them, and both Alice and Mist's faces show complete shock. Alice thinks to herself that she can't believe Karim is acting like the boss so easily, while Shakiro notes it looks like the creatures were approaching with intent to attack. Alice says fine, she gets it, but then Karim orders the two of them to go find some animals and take them down while she keeps watch. She adds that it's convenient but skills are banned this time, and Alice responds affirmatively. Meanwhile, out in the grassland training area, Karim warns Alice that if she fails, she'll have to take Professor Callum's extracurricular lessons. Alice calls out to her brother angrily, yelling at him and calling him a bastard. At the same time, Shakiro notices something and asks Mist what's wrong. Mist brings up the earlier encounter, asking if that person was his younger sister. Shakiro admits that she is, though he sounds uncertain about it and starts explaining what happened. A little before he met Mist, he was falsely accused, made into a criminal slave and sent to North Foria to perform forced labor. Mist says she believes him because she can swear to keep believing in him, and Shakiro thinks to himself that if it's Mist who believes in him so much, then maybe there's hope. Then Shakiro continues his story. By the time he arrived in North Folia, Alice had already become a famous adventurer and had been telling everyone he was incompetent and a piece of shit. Because those words came from a sage, he lost all credibility as a human being. They worked him like a slave until the day he was thrown down. He had no mercy spared for him and was treated like trash, eventually cast down into the abyss of the deep hole. He clarifies that while others did the actual deed, those adventurers were the ones who physically threw him in. Mist reacts with shock at how terrible that was. Shakiro tells Mist that even if Alice's role was indirect, he still thinks she's the one who pushed him. He remembers falling into the abyss and questions why Alice would do this, their family aren't they? Then Shakiro admits that's why he never wanted to see Alice again if possible. Mist stays quiet for a moment before asking him if he doesn't want to forgive them. But Mist presses the question, asking if he means he doesn't want to forgive Alice or if he actually wants to make up with her instead. Shakiro asks what she means by that. Mist clarifies that it's exactly what it sounds like and asks which one he wants. Shakiro just stands there thinking about what he actually wants from Alice and what he wants to do about this whole situation. Meanwhile, Shakiro struggles with his thoughts. He doesn't even know what he wants to do anymore. He apologizes to Mist, admitting he doesn't have the answers right now. Mist reaches out toward him with an emotional expression, tears filling her eyes as she processes his confession. Mist calls out to him gently, telling him there's no need to rush. Shakiro suggests they think about it and decide together from here on. He looks down thoughtfully, the weight of his uncertainty still visible on his face. Mist speaks carefully, asking Shakiro not to make all his decisions based on anger and sadness alone. She reminds him that he was the one who taught her that lesson. Shakiro just stands there with his back turned, listening to her words. Then Mist tells Shakiro that no matter what answer he gives, she'll be by his side. She adds that was all she wanted to tell him, looking pretty emotional. Shakiro responds quietly, calling her name. Meanwhile, in the background, Karim appears and tells them to hurry since Callum is waiting. Shakiro thanks Mist, realizing he needs her. But suddenly Mist senses a creature nearby and points it out. Shakiro thinks to himself that this is exactly why there's something he has to confirm. The scene shifts to the forest where Karim announces the next activity will be individual exploration. Alice volunteers enthusiastically, saying she'll do her best, and Karim confirms they'll start with Mist. Karim comments on how fired up Mist seems, and Shakiro responds with a quiet acknowledgement. But then Alice suddenly becomes serious. Her eye narrows with intensity. She draws her weapon with a dramatic flash of energy and confronts Shakiro directly, demanding to know what the meaning of this is. Karim asks what the meaning of this is, addressing Shakiro as Master Cyclo. Karim tells Shakiro she's been meaning to ask him again, what's he plotting, and why did he approach them in the first place? Shakiro responds that he already told her, he's fallen for Cyclo and wants to protect girls like Mist. Karim acknowledges those words probably weren't a lie either, but she presses further. Beyond all that, he must have something he wants to achieve by forming this party. She shows off her ornate weapon and tells him to talk, making it clear she's ready to pull the trigger at any moment. Shakiro realizes that's exactly why he brought her into the party. It's way easier to deal with her if she's right in front of him rather than plotting something behind his back. The two face each other with tense expressions hanging in the air. Karim asks if he really distrusts her that much. Shakiro states it plainly, he doesn't trust others and the only one he trusts is Mist. Karim responds that not trusting others is just common sense, calling him out for acting all high and mighty like he's uncovered some truth of the world. She points out that humans survive by constantly weighing risks against rewards, since being untrustworthy is literally part of their nature. But on top of that, he's gone and convinced himself that he's the only one who's special. Shakiro tenses up at her words. Karim continues her harsh assessment, telling Shakiro he's lived his whole life without ever actually knowing how to doubt others. She says he just looks like a spoiled, empty-headed brat throwing a temper tantrum. Shakiro sits there slumped over in a defeated posture. He tells her to shut up, but his voice lacks any real conviction. Karim presses on, pointing out that all he has to do is say no, that's it. The tension between them reaches a breaking point. Karim demands to know why he can't say anything back. Then a dark flashback shows Shakiro's suffering, his clock eye visible as he recalls his resolve to take revenge on everything in this world. He stands there in the present moment, looking down at himself with Mist's small figure visible below, completely unable to respond to Karim's challenge. Karim holds her gun steady and tells Shakiro this is all she has, the only way she knows how to live. Then she continues, saying it's exactly because he's such a brat that she has high expectations for him. Shakiro looks confused and surprised by her words. But Karim keeps talking, telling Shakiro he's just a stupid, kind brat who suddenly stumbled into great power. And that's exactly why there are things only someone like him can do. She states plainly that's what she believes. Then Karim sets down her ornate guns and smiles calmly at Shakiro. She tells him if he doesn't like it, he can kill her whenever he wants. In exchange, though, she asks if he'll make her a promise. Shakiro questions what kind of promise. Karim explains her vision. She wants to smash this world where people's wills, desires, and everything gets twisted by skills. She wants to create a world where people can honestly chase their dreams without being mocked. The panel shows glimpses of various people, including scenes from Shakiro's past. Karim looks directly at Shakiro with a confident smile and tells him if he could make that promise, she wouldn't mind if he killed her anytime. Karim tosses her gun away with this flourish of clock imagery, and both of them just stand there in the forest clearing together. Karim in her revealing outfit and Shakiro in his dark clothing. Shakiro responds that even if she forces a promise like that on him, it's just a nuisance. Then Shakiro stretches his arms above his head, and Karim smiles and acknowledges his response. Meanwhile, the three of them walk together through the bright forest path, moving forward as a group. Shakiro tells Mist she passed, and Mist responds with pure joy like straight up celebrating her success. Then Mist and Karim are standing together in the forest, where Mist looks confused while Karim's got this knowing smile. Karim thinks to herself that Shakiro is exactly the kind of man she thought he was. Someone in the background notices something and wonders if something happened again. Someone wishes Shakiro good luck, announcing it's his turn next. Karim looks down at her feet and quietly acknowledges it. In the next moment, hands clench together with sudden force, and Mist reflects internally on what just happened. She realizes Mist was looking out for her, and that Karim saw right through her. She feels pathetic about the whole situation. She recognizes that she suddenly obtained this immense power and just happened to get her hands on it. Mist looks down with this conflicted expression and admits that Shakiro is probably right. She decides maybe she'll try believing in him a little longer. The three party members continue through the forest together, and Mist raises her fist with renewed determination. The three of them stand together as members of the Wheel of Fortune. Karim announces it's finally time for today's final practical exercise. She explains that she and Shakiro will keep the monsters at bay so Mist can finish them off. Mist confirms she understands. Then Karim adds that this will confirm their coordination and level up Mist at the same time, and Mist responds affirmatively. A massive boar-like monster appears in the forest. Karim spots it and calls out that she found it. She identifies it as the strongest monster in this forest. Karim asks if the other two are ready, and Mist confirms she is while acknowledging the information about the monster. Shakiro tells them to move out. Karim launches herself at the massive boar with her weapon raised high, calling out to Shakiro that she's counting on him. Her blade comes down hard, striking the beast with full force. The boar staggers from the combined assault. Shakiro tells Mist to hang in there, but Mist responds that he doesn't have to tell her. Both Shakiro's Mistletoe and Karim's attacks are being held back on purpose, setting up the finishing blow for Mist. Suddenly, someone yells for everyone to get back. A massive cross-shaped magical barrier erupts across the battlefield. Mist launches herself forward, announcing she's going in, and her attack creates a brilliant geometric pattern of light and energy. The magical assault connects with devastating force. The boar roars as the attack tears right through it, blood spraying across the forest floor as the creature takes the full brunt of Mist's finishing strike. The three party members stand together as the dust settles. Karim asks if they got the monster, but Shakiro says no. Then Mist notices something wrong. In the undergrowth, dark fur shifts and moves, and suddenly speed lines cut across the panel as something rushes toward them. Meanwhile, Shakiro celebrates with Mist, telling her she leveled up and that it's amazing. Karim watches them and says she's gonna puke from all this sweetness. Mist tells her master this is embarrassing, but Shakiro just laughs it off, telling Karim not to be like that. Then Karim's expression turns serious as she notices movement in the bushes nearby. Shakiro calls out to Karim, telling her to keep the momentum going. Karim responds dryly, saying look at him getting all energetic all of a sudden. She thinks to herself that it's probably best to keep quiet about that for now. And the panel shows Karim in her full witch costume with the elaborate hat and outfit. Later, at the deep hole entrance, Shakiro says they should confirm today's schedule. Shakiro tells Mist that with how she is now, she could probably make it to the first boss. Karim says she's got it and Mist confirms as well. Then Shakiro adds that confirming their coordination is important. Karim jokes that she'd rather not get shot in the back by Cyclo after all, then immediately laughs it off saying she's just kidding. Karim sighs and tells everyone to get going. Both Mist and Shakiro confirm they're ready. The view opens up to show the vast interior of the dungeon stretching down into darkness. Someone explains that on the first floor they'll find skeletons, and another voice confirms they see skeleton monsters ahead. The narration continues. This dungeon is crawling with nasty monsters with twisted taste. The goal is to fully conquer the deep hole and shut down the dungeon's functions to protect the citizens from the threat of monsters, which is exactly how it came to be called the worst dungeon. Karim calls out to Cyclo and Mist. Meanwhile, skeleton monsters emerge from the dungeon depths, their bones rattling as they approach. Karim notes that they're here, thinking to herself that this is finally the first step. Karim tells Mist she's leaving the finishing blow to her, and Mist confirms she's ready. Then the action kicks off as Karim launches into combat, striking at the skeleton monsters. Mist follows up with her attack, delivering a devastating finishing blow that shatters the skeleton completely. Karim finishes off another skeleton with a devastating strike. The bones explode apart under the force of her attack. She smiles confidently and tells Shakiro she told him she wouldn't mess up, complimenting him on a nice move. Then Mist unleashes her Holy Burst ability, and the holy light tears through multiple skeletons at once. The undead creatures crumble and fall apart as the sacred energy destroys them. Someone declares the target successfully eliminated, but another voice cuts in saying no, not yet. More skeleton remains collapse to the ground. Someone points toward a corner and says the next threat is just around there. Shakiro's clock sense picks up about 20 skeletons approaching from that direction, and the horde of undead starts closing in. Karim says she'll just leave it to her this time, but then adds that won't be much use for Mist's training. Mist asks what they should do, and Karim questions what Shakiro is planning. Shakiro activates his clockwork creation ability and says if they're confirming their coordination, he should show his hand too, manifesting an ornate pocket watch mechanism. Someone asks what that is, wondering if it's a pocket watch, while another voice notes the hands aren't moving. Shakiro positions himself and winds up the device, then pulls the pin, explaining that once he pulls the pin, the hands will advance. Suddenly, the pocket watch detonates with massive explosive force. Mist and Karim stare at the destruction as Mist calls out asking what it is, while Karim addresses him as Master Cyclo. Shakiro explains that just as they can see, it's designed to explode the moment it hits zero. But Karim immediately bans the weapon, telling Shakiro he absolutely cannot use it while she's out in front no matter what, saying it's obviously dangerous. Shakiro protests, asking why since he worked so hard on the design. Karim laughs while Mist says the power was incredible, and Shakiro mutters about how proud he was of it. Meanwhile, the fighting continues as they press forward through the dungeon, engaging more skeleton monsters in close combat. The battle wraps up, and the dungeon floor is littered with destroyed monster remains. Karim looks over the aftermath and says it's looking good, they can move on to the next floor. Mist thanks her profusely for the help, and the party climbs the dungeon stairs toward the next level as Mist looks around in awe at their progress. The party enters this massive underground cave chamber with water flowing through it. The ceiling arches way up above them with stalactites hanging down everywhere. Someone explains that this is where the deep hall truly begins, where the monsters get way more vicious and the terrain gets insanely complex. Mist just stares at the environment, completely blown away that there's a cave like this inside the dungeon. Then Karim warns them to watch their step or they'll fall into the abyss and die at worst. Shakiro reassures Mist that if anything happens, he'll protect her. But as they're navigating the dangerous terrain, Shakiro suddenly pauses. Mist notices right away and asks what's the matter. Shakiro says more importantly, they've been followed ever since the first floor. Mist wonders if it's a monster while Karim just stays quiet. The party starts discussing their stalker. Karim notes that monsters don't leave their territories, so it's likely a human. She agrees the person is no amateur, constantly maintaining maximum distance without being noticed. Karim adds that with Cyclo around, they don't have to worry about surprise attacks. Mist agrees and Shakiro tells them to leave it to him. Meanwhile, the hidden stalker observes them and mutters something about that girl. Karim looks around and notes the terrain has changed since the last time she climbed this, commenting that the dungeon is a living thing after all. Karim then questions Shakiro about having climbed back up. Shakiro explains a lot happened and he was kicked down into the abyss, falling all the way to the middle layers in one go. Karim says she's amazed he's still alive. Shakiro admits he was lucky and explains the spiderwebs acted like a net to catch him. Shakiro thinks to himself that it's about time he had missed give Karim some surprise attack training. But suddenly, an explosion erupts near them. Alice's voice yells out to watch out for Big Brother. The surprise attack comes at Shakiro with explosive force. Shakiro stays calm as the blast hits. Karim reacts with total shock at the sudden assault. Shakiro mutters Alice's name under his breath. Alice appears in her full witch outfit with her massive decorated hat, nervously claiming what a coincidence it is to see her big brother here. A text label identifies her as the Chaser, with flames blazing in the background. Alice quickly explains she just happened to be passing by, and that she's so glad she could protect him, insisting Shakiro has it all wrong. Then she adds that since he told her not to get close, she'll be going now. Shakiro asks what the hell she thinks she's doing. Karim tells them to continue the training and asks if this is okay with Shakiro. Shakiro looks frustrated, wondering what the hell Alice is trying to pull here. The dungeon environment stretches out before them with cracks running through the stone walls. Alice launches herself forward with her attack, shouting Aqua Cutter, as she declares she'll protect her big brother, the water-based strike cutting through the air toward the incoming monsters. A close-up shows Shakiro's eye. Shakiro calls out for Alice to wait. Alice is riding on top of some creature, moving through the dungeon with Shakiro and Mist visible in the background. Alice shouts in surprise, and then exclaims what a coincidence again and again and again to run into her big brother here. Shakiro asks what she thinks she's doing, and Alice responds innocently, asking whatever he means. Small panels show Alice's expression shifting nervously. Alice looks even more nervous and starts to say something but trails off. The scene shows defeated monsters lying on the ground with Shakiro standing among them. Shakiro explains that since Alice took them all down, it's not training anymore. They're in the middle of training for surprise attacks right now. Shakiro tells her she's a nuisance and to please just stay out of the way. Alice responds tearfully that she just wanted to make up with him, and that's why she came. Alice stands there emotionally overwhelmed, apologizing repeatedly and saying she's so sorry. She calls out Master to Shakiro desperately. Meanwhile, Shakiro walks away through the dungeon, muttering that good grief, she should give him a break. Close-ups show Shakiro's face from the side and front. Then Karim standing in the dungeon environment with sparkles and light effects around her, commenting that Shakiro's little sister seems to be taking this a lot harder than she expected. Alice is shown diving down with dramatic motion, then standing uncertainly in the dungeon. Karim adds that she wonders how this is going to turn out. Meanwhile, in the middle of the chaotic training battle, Shakiro yells at Alice to shut up. Alice just stands there emotionally devastated, thinking to herself that her big brother really does hate her now. She wonders what she can do to make him forgive her, how she can get him to smile at her like he used to. Then Alice agrees with something, saying that's correct. She looks out over the massive abyss where Shakiro stands in the distance, and Alice decides she should fall into the abyss too so she can understand her big brother better. The scene shows Shakiro standing atop the dark creature on the cliff while Alice remains below. Alice processes what's happening, making a small sound before her expression changes. She calls out hesitantly to her big brother. Suddenly, Shakiro's face appears with a smile as he calls out Alice's name and tells her to come here. Alice looks up from the ground below and tells him she loves him. Alice throws herself off the cliff toward the abyss below, with a massive monster claw visible above her, and as she falls, she tells Shakiro she'll do her best. Back in reality, Mist checks on Shakiro and asks if he's alright. Shakiro tells her they should resume the training. The group's standing near the edge of the abyss in the dungeon when Karim calls out to Shakiro, asking if it's really okay to just leave his little sister like that. Shakiro clarifies that he's not trying to meddle or tell Karim to make up with Alice or anything. Karim agrees it would be a problem if Alice interfered any further. Meanwhile, the scene shows Alice falling through the air toward the abyss. Karim observes that the girl looked like she was really at the end of her rope. There's no telling what she might do. She asks if they should go after Alice since she might still be plotting something. Karim says that's not exactly what she meant, but whatever. Then the scene transitions to a wide view of the starry night sky. Down below, Alice's body slides down the cliff face. Suddenly, Shakiro recognizes something and realizes it's Alice's clothing. His expression shifts to shock as he processes what this means. Someone yells out for their master as Alice's dress and bow are seen flying through the air. Another voice calls out Alice's name with urgency, but then the scene shifts to a peaceful street outside a building where Shakiro and Alice stand together with shopping bags. Shakiro tells Alice he can't understand her if she's crying like this. Alice sits on the ground with tears streaming down her face, asking why they don't have a dad. She continues, saying that people told her she and Shakiro aren't even real siblings, that it's weird not to have a father. Shakiro holds Alice's hands and calls her name, telling her that even so, she's still his precious little sister. A memory flashes of them as kids holding hands with their mother. Alice looks up at Shakiro with tears in her eyes while he gives her this gentle smile. Alice responds happily through her tears. Meanwhile, Shakiro thinks to himself about when he forgot this feeling. A memory shows the two of them as children walking together. Then another flashback depicts young Shakiro protecting Alice during some dangerous moment. He wonders when he lost sight of these emotions. Shakiro's voice echoes, telling Alice that no matter what happens, she's his precious family. The memory shows Alice smiling warmly at those words. But then the scene shifts to the ravine where Alice stands on a damaged wooden bridge, illuminated in this otherworldly glow. Someone screams her name. Alice's final words drift through the air as she tells her big brother she loves him. Alice's body tumbles through the air, falling into the abyss, her dress and figure just plummeting downward. Karim watches in horror, sweat running down her face as she witnesses Alice's fall. Someone screams Alice's name desperately. Shakiro activates clockwork creation, and this massive mechanical weapon just materializes out of nowhere, gears and mechanisms all working together in this intricate design. He grabs hold of the construct and launches himself into action, the clockwork weapon tearing through the air as he drives forward with fierce determination, leaving massive destruction in his wake. Then Shakiro catches Alice mid-fall, both of them colliding together in the air, pressed close against each other from the impact of the rescue. Alice looks up in complete shock, totally stunned at finding herself suddenly safe in someone's arms. Alice asks why her big brother is there. She's completely thrown off by his appearance, but Shakiro just snaps at her to shut up if she doesn't want to bite her tongue. Alice's face shows overwhelming emotion as tears well up in her eyes while Shakiro carries her, running along the cliff face and making his escape with his little sister secured in his arms. Meanwhile, Mist and Karim call out for Master Cyclo from a distance. Mist says she's just glad they're both safe, and Shakiro tells them not to worry, that it's okay. The group gathers together in this awkward moment, everyone uncertain how to process what just happened, Alice's face showing she's still emotionally overwhelmed. There's a moment of physical comedy as Alice reacts to something, her chest bouncing with the movement. But then Shakiro holds Alice close and demands to know why the hell she did that. Karim watches from nearby as the confrontation unfolds, the scene flashing back to Alice's fall from the ravine. Shakiro calls it a suicide mission. Alice explains that she thought if she went through the same thing as Shakiro, maybe he'd forgive her, says it's because she did such a horrible thing to him. Her face shows the weight of her guilt as tears start forming in her eyes. Then Alice looks up at Shakiro in confusion and asks what he means. Shakiro's holding her protectively as she processes his words with visible shock on her face. Shakiro tells Alice he'll never forgive her, but he admits he doesn't hate her enough to want her dead. He demands she can't just die like this because they're family, his voice cracking with desperation as tears stream down Alice's face. Shakiro tells Alice that all she has to do is wait for him, says that's more than enough. Alice promises through her tears that she'll work hard, asks if he'll come to get her, and if he'll forgive her someday if she waits. Shakiro agrees and says he wants to do that too. Alice breaks down crying and repeats that she's so glad over and over. Meanwhile, below them, Karim and Mist watch the siblings' reconciliation from a distance. Karim stands there watching the whole emotional scene unfold before her. She tells them that being so defenseless when crying like this is dangerous. Meanwhile, Mist and Shakiro remain together as the moment settles around them. Someone asks if Shakiro doesn't want to forgive them, then Alice calls out to him. Karim observes that he's found his answer. Alice's face is streaked with tears as she speaks to her brother, telling him she should have just talked to him properly from the start. But Shakiro responds that she doesn't need to apologize. Alice continues, calling him big brother and saying she knows he would never seriously try to set her up. She suggests they can go back to the way things were if he wants. Shakiro asks if she could just wait until he's calmed down a bit, and Alice's face lights up with joy, promising she'll be waiting. Suddenly, Alice's mind floods with memories. The images cascade through her thoughts, showing scenes of Shakiro's past suffering. The painful memories return in fragments, the mockery and abuse he endured. The realization of what her brother went through hits her all at once. Then Alice suddenly collides with Shakiro, grabbing onto him tightly. Mist calls out in concern, asking if he's all right. Alice herself seems confused by her own actions, questioning why she did that. Meanwhile, Karim watches the scene and wonders what she should do about the situation. The group remains there on the ravine slope, the tension palpable. Karim looks at the scene with a serious expression, thinking to herself that this has become a real pain to deal with. Alice calls out urgently, asking what's wrong with her big brother. Mist calls to Shakiro too, voice full of concern. Meanwhile, Shakiro's mind is racing, trying to figure out why those memories came flooding back so suddenly, so vividly. He tries to steel himself, thinking he shouldn't be afraid of guys like that anymore. Then someone explains that what Shakiro's going through is trauma. The scene cuts to show Karim, Mist, and Alice all standing together, concern written all over their faces as they watch him. Karim observes that Shakiro's reaction looks exactly like those other adventurers who suffered the same kind of trauma. Someone asks if there's any cure, what they can even do for him. Mist explains that honestly, there's not much they can really do since it's a matter of the heart. She adds that some people stay that way for life while others just snap out of it by chance. It varies from person to person. Alice suggests that maybe if she stays with him and helps him get used to it little by little, it might actually help. But someone tells her that's a pretty tough approach. Mist warns that trying to get him used to it could end up making his symptoms even worse instead. Then Karim tells Alice there are only two things she can do. Karim asks what Alice will choose. Alice thinks it over for a moment and says she'd rather maintain the status quo than make things worse. But then she decides she'll carry out the plan anyway, even if it means risking things getting worse. Shakiro stands there with determination written all across his face, telling everyone, including Alice, that he's sorry. But he doesn't want to give in to something as nonsensical as this. Meanwhile, Alice watches him from behind, calling out to her big brother. Then Shakiro declares he won't let things get worse, and beyond that he wants to make them better. Karim tells him that's right, she figured he'd say that. But then Mist speaks up and asks if she can suggest something. Shakiro confirms that was his intention at first. Mist brings up why he bought her and bound her with a slave contract, pointing out that he can't trust others. She looks thoughtful for a moment and brings up a suggestion, telling them that maybe they should place a slave contract on Alice as well. Karim just stands there listening while Mist continues explaining her reasoning. In the next moment though, Shakiro thanks Mist for the idea but tells her it's fine and she doesn't need to worry about it. Someone else points out that making his own sister a slave is a bit much, then quickly apologizes and agrees that's right. Mist's eyes widen in surprise at the response. Someone gets excited and yells out that they think becoming a slave is actually a great idea. Then another voice chimes in, saying they know of a perfect opportunity. The whole party stands together as this conversation unfolds. Meanwhile, the scene shifts with a narration explaining what happened before leaving the royal capital. The view transitions to an exterior shot of the royal capital, Adventurers Guild building, and suddenly, inside, someone gets grabbed and slammed down hard. Inside the guild, Alice approaches someone at a desk, asking them to handle the remittance procedures again this time. But the man at the desk responds by calling her name, telling her she doesn't have to do this anymore. The narration identifies him as Guild Master Regia Sandria, Alice's adoptive father. He looks at her seriously from behind his desk. Alice reacts with confusion, asking what he means. Regius tells her he heard her brother was sent to North Folia as a criminal slave. Alice seems stunned, then Regius adds that actually he supposes he should say at last. Alice immediately protests that her brother would never do something like that, calls it a complete lie. Then Regius calmly explains that apparently Shakiro was the perpetrator of a series of sexual assaults. Alice's face twists in anger and frustration. But then someone points out that she was always calling her brother incompetent and a loser. Alice insists that's different though. Regius tells her that more importantly, there's something else he wants to show her. He gestures towards something and tells her to go ahead and open it. Alice thinks to herself that if that's all it is, she wishes people would just trust her big brother more. The scene shows an ornate key resting on a surface. Regius confirms that's it. Alice picks up the key and asks where it's for. The view widens to show these massive double doors, and Alice and Regius are standing right in front of them as they start to open with this dramatic effect. Regius tells Alice to go ahead and open it up. Then he explains that it's a custom piece he commissioned from the son of the Craftsman Guild's master. The right side of the panel reveals this enormous, ornate decorative gate with intricate scrollwork and patterns covering the entire surface. And honestly, it's a pretty impressive piece of metalwork. Meanwhile, Alice struggles to open whatever mechanism is there, putting serious effort into it with multiple attempts. But suddenly, a massive explosion tears through the area with devastating force, and when the dust settles, Regius is standing before Alice holding these stacks of money, asking if she's surprised. Then he reveals this is all the money he was supposed to transfer to her brother. Alice's face shows complete shock at the revelation, but then Regius explains that actually, the money she thought she was sending to her brother for the past 2 years, he's been keeping for himself. He figured it would be better used for her future than on some guy destined to become a criminal. Meanwhile, Alice's voice echoes through her memories as she realizes she's been fighting desperately all by herself this whole time. The brutal combat scenes flash by, showing her battling massive wolf-like monsters completely alone, and she did it all for the sake of the big brother she loves so much. In her memories, someone comments that they heard she took down an A-rank monster solo, as expected of the sage. Alice responds that if she doesn't go solo, the reward gets split. Then the scene shifts to Alice bundled up in winter gear during some harsh mission, and she reflects that no matter how painful the mission was, she could push through for her brother's sake. Back in the present, Regius just smirks at her, and that's when Alice realizes what kind of person he truly is. She asks if he went and ruined everything on his own. Suddenly, Alice unleashes her devastating magic attack. The spell name rings out as Prominence Nova erupts with catastrophic power. The explosion absolutely rocks the city. Someone yells asking if that's the Adventurers Guild while another panics, asking if it's a Demon King attack. Down in the chaos, people scramble as someone urgently calls for ants and others to get a healer fast because the guild master is gravely injured. Then a figure rides up on horseback, and someone observes the scene in shock, noting that he's being beaten up. Alice speaks up with her reasoning, telling them she thought if she let him catch her as a criminal slave, everything would be settled. Someone confirms that's the deal while Karim and Mist stand nearby watching this whole thing unfold. But then Shakiro snaps at Alice, calling her an absolute moron. Alice fires back asking why he's reacting that way, and suddenly the confrontation escalates as Alice attacks Shakiro with explosive force. Alice protests that she worked so hard for him and then he went and ruined everything. Karim cuts in, pointing out that even if Alice is upset, blowing Shakiro up was overkill and she should have stopped at a punch to the face at most. Alice tries to interject, but Shakiro demands to know why she's acting all nonchalant like she didn't do something wrong. Karim clarifies that what Alice did still qualifies as assault and is a straight-up crime. Karim continues explaining that even considering the circumstances, Alice's response was excessive. She should have stopped at a single punch. She points out that the assault charge still stands regardless, while Shakiro appears frustrated by the whole situation. Then Alice mentions something about Shakiro having a connection with the Margrave, saying it's not bad for her big brother. Someone addresses Shakiro as Cyclokun, noting that he's got things settled with the Margrave now. Karim realizes Alice is too dangerous to be left loose and decides she'll have to take custody of her personally. Alice suggests they can probably just toss all the paperwork aside and forget about it, and Mist agrees, saying they should make use of whatever they can. Shakiro tells Mist they're going home, things have clearly taken a turn for the worse. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to the Margrave's estate, showing the grand mansion. Inside, Regius speaks about the situation. Since Alice is the culprit behind the royal capital's guild bombing and is Shakiro's biological sister, they want to take custody of her as a criminal slave. Regius asks if Shakiro knows what a lord like him thinks when an SS5 rank adventurer asks for a favor. He addresses Shakiro as Cyclokun and asks if he can handle the procedures. Shakiro responds that it's not a problem at all. Then Regius explains that he weighs the costs carefully. Thanks to Shakiro, his head is constantly spinning with eccentric ideas and his worries never end, but every day is a blast for him. Regius notes that they're pretty far from the royal capital anyway, and honestly their ties there are weak at this point. He asks Shakiro if he can count on him for this. Shakiro confirms he's in might catch some glares from people, but he doesn't really mind. Regius thanks him, saying that's a huge help. The scene transitions to nighttime at the mansion exterior, then cuts inside to show someone sitting alone in a chair. Back at the mansion, Mist approaches Shakiro while wearing her maid outfit. She asks if he has a moment to talk. Shakiro tells her to come in and they settle into the room together. Shakiro asks what's up if something's the matter. Mist says there's something she needs to apologize for. Mist confesses that she actually possesses the means to cure his condition. Shakiro confirms he already knows about it. His expression shifts as he processes where this conversation is going. Then Shakiro figures it out, asking if it's restoration magic. Mist hesitates for a second but confirms it. But then Mist explains the catch. If she reconstructed him before his heart could heal properly, all his memories from the time they left the royal capital until now might just be erased, even the fact that they met, including everything with her. The scene flashes back to the ruins where they first encountered each other. Mist admits she didn't want him to forget her, confessing this was all just her own selfishness. Mist completely breaks down, tears streaming down her face. She says she couldn't bring herself to say it earlier and apologizes over and over. Meanwhile, Shakiro just watches her with this calm, understanding expression. Shakiro tells her there's nothing to apologize for since it's just as they promised, and then he thanks her. Mist responds emotionally, barely able to speak his title. Then Shakiro tells her he'll never forget her. The memories they've made since meeting are incredibly precious to him. The panel shows a montage of their time together, all the moments they've shared. The two are now extremely close, their faces nearly touching. Shakiro asks her to use her restoration magic on him. Suddenly, Mist realizes the significance of his phrasing. She points out that he didn't order her, he actually asked her. With tears in her eyes but a smile on her face, Mist agrees. Mist and Shakiro hold hands together, their fingers interlaced, and the moment is surrounded by soft magical sparkles and a gentle glow. Mist looks up at him with trust and gratitude, while Shakiro gazes down at her with reassurance. The restoration magic is about to begin. Meanwhile, the magical energy intensifies around their joined hands. A massive clock-like symbol manifests, glowing brilliantly as the spell activates. Mist declares that she'll respond to his trust and kindness in kind. The power of her restoration magic begins to surge. Then the magic explodes into full activation. Mist is lifted by the overwhelming energy as massive wing-like formations of pure light spread behind her. The resurrection technique engulfs both of them in radiant power, and Shakiro stands before the overwhelming display as the spell reaches its peak. The next morning arrives at the mansion, and inside one of the grand rooms, Mist stands in her maid outfit looking emotional. Shakiro has his back turned while Alice and Karim wait nearby. Mist tells her big brother that she's going now, her voice carrying both nervousness and hope. The three women watch with intense focus. Karim stands with her usual composed expression, Alice looks concerned and anxious, and Mist has tears welling up in her eyes. Meanwhile, Shakiro remains with his back turned, his white hair visible as someone asks him how they look. Back in the mansion room, Alice asks her big brother how it is, and Mist thinks to herself that if her regeneration magic was successful, then surely everything should be restored. Karim quietly addresses him as Master Cyclo, and everyone waits for Shakiro's reaction, the tension thick in the air as they all anticipate whether the magic actually worked. Then Shakiro opens his eyes and smiles gently, telling everyone that it's okay, everything is back to the way it was. The women look at him with relief and he confirms it with a simple affirmation. His white hair has returned and his vision is completely restored. Alice comes running back and Shakiro welcomes her home with a warm smile. As the emotional reunion settles, Mist says she's glad everything worked out, but then Karim watches them both and comments that they're quite the pair of troublemaking siblings. Everyone acknowledges the moment with relief. Later on, Alice expresses how glad she is about everything. She thanks Mist sincerely, telling her that it's all thanks to her gathering the courage to use regeneration magic. The flashback shows the brilliant magical light of that moment as Alice smiles with genuine gratitude. But at that exact moment during the spell, Shakiro felt something profound happening between them. He could sense Mist's soul and his own touching within each other, connecting on a deeper level. Shakiro stares off as the realization forms in his mind, wondering if what he's thinking could actually be true. A silhouette appears in his thoughts. Meanwhile, Mist gets all flustered and tries to dismiss whatever she's considering. Then Alice speaks up, clarifying that she's not saying she's happy to be a slave or anything, but if that's what her big brother wants, she'll accept it. Shakiro redirects the conversation, telling Alice they need to get the enslavement contract over with now. Alice responds that she's counting on him, that he can take custody of her as a criminal slave this way. They head to the official location where an attendant greets Lord Owen, noting it's been a long time. The enslavement contract magic activates with overwhelming power. Shakiro channels his magical energy and the chains manifest, then shatter in brilliant light. Alice watches the whole process unfold, realizing this is what a slavery contract actually looks like. The official observes that Shakiro's magical power is as incredible as ever. The massive clock-like magical symbol appears and engraves itself onto Alice, completing the contract binding. Alice looks down with mixed emotions, processing that she's really become her big brother's slave now. The ornate chandelier hangs above them in the grand room, but Shakiro stops her train of thought immediately and tells her no. He explains that he's going to give her 2 orders. Alice looks up at him with surprise and anticipation as he begins announcing the first one. Shakiro pats Alice's head and tells her to learn some common sense. Alice protests that she has plenty of common sense, but Shakiro counters by pointing out that people with common sense don't go around causing explosions. Alice looks confused and caught off guard by the comeback. Shakiro continues, announcing the second thing, and Alice is fuming in the background as he stands there all calm in the doorway. He delivers his second command, telling her to be honest with herself. Alice's face fills the panel with this sparkly background as the weight of the order just sinks in. Then Shakiro looks at Alice seriously and tells her this is his first and last command. Alice processes the emotional weight of the moment, clearly feeling something heavy. Meanwhile, the group reconvenes as Shakiro apologizes to Karim and Mist for keeping them waiting and thanks them both for their patience. They walk together through the grand hallway and Mist smiles warmly, telling Alice she's so glad the two of them made up. But then Alice speaks with intense emotion, declaring that being treated like Shakiro's property is actually a total win for her. She admits she loves him so much she just can't help herself. Karim, Mist, and Shakiro all stand together in awkward silence with uncomfortable expressions plastered on their faces. Suddenly, someone notices something with surprise. Alice realizes with intensity that this must be the effect of the command to be honest. An elegant woman observes and asks if the subservient contract can actually perform mind control. An older man with a cap dismisses the idea, explaining it doesn't have that kind of power, it's just a delusion. Alice bows down in this overly dramatic pose while Shakiro tries to calm her down. He awkwardly admits he really does like her too. But then Alice clarifies with passion that when she said she loves him, she meant she wants to marry him. Shakiro immediately protests that's not what he meant at all. Karim, Mist, and Shakiro all react in shock to the marriage declaration. Alice recalls that when she was little, Shakiro said he'd marry her. Shakiro explains their blood-related family so they can't get married, and he questions whether he even said something like that in the first place. An official explains the noble law to Alice and Shakiro, laying it out pretty clearly. In their case, even as real siblings, if Lord Cyclo becomes a noble, marriage would actually be possible. Alice's eyes light up as she confirms that under the noble law, even marriage is allowed, and that this law only applies to nobles. The official shows a diagram illustrating how a brother and sister with different surnames can marry under noble status. But Shakiro immediately protests that he's not guaranteed to become one. Alice stands up confidently and reminds him that if he conquers the deep hole, he'll become a noble from that achievement alone, and she declares she'll help too. Shakiro just stares at her in disbelief and asks if she became adopted just for that reason. Alice stammers out a denial, but she can't fully commit to it. Then Alice admits with intense emotion that it was at least half the reason she did it. Someone in the background comments on how pitiful the guild master of the royal capital is for getting used like this. But Alice snaps back that Shakiro doesn't need to pity that guy. Shakiro loses it and smacks her, yelling that this is exactly what he means when he says she needs to learn some common sense. Alice gets hit with the training blow and accepts that this is what she gets for going against the whole common sense thing. Despite the pain, Alice's face fills with hearts as she admits this feels like her big brother training her. And man, it feels so good to her. Meanwhile, Shakiro stands in the background looking deeply uncomfortable with the whole situation. Karim observes the scene and comments that Cyclo's really gone all in, even with his own little sister. Next to him, Miss stands nearby with a blank expression, clearly shocked by what she's witnessed. Then suddenly, all three girls gang up together. Mist, Alice, and Karim all yell in unison that they won't let anyone have their master. The official character looks on with approval, declaring that truly heroes love beauty, and this is exactly what he expected from Lord Cyclo. But Shakiro protests that he doesn't love beauty at all. Later, in a quieter moment, Shakiro looks at someone and observes that they've become so calm, like a completely different person from back then. A flashback panel shows when Lord Owen first wanted to buy a slave, specifically only ones whose actions could be bound by a slavery spell. Someone reflects that Shakiro's transformation must be thanks to those girls. Another voice chimes in, agreeing with that assessment. The scene transitions to an exterior shot of the mansion buildings sitting under a cloudy sky. Then the view shifts over to the royal capital, showing the grand castle and cathedral rising above the city. Down in the streets below, Lord Bugen walks through in his police inspector uniform. Townspeople notice him passing by and comment on how that's Lord Bugen the inspector. Others start gushing about how even though he's a noble, he's so down-to-earth and charming. Lord Bugen just continues his patrol through the sparkling city streets with that characteristically composed expression of his. But suddenly, Lord Bugen screams out in frustration that there's not a single decent woman around anymore. The guy complains about already having hunted down every good woman in this town. Apparently hunting for prey is the only fun he has left. While walking through the streets with some female citizen, he explains that the reason a noble like him works as an officer alongside commoners is pretty simple. Just being called an officer makes those stupid citizens trust him, and all the more so since he's a noble. The panel shows a woman's face transforming from distressed tears to composed relief. Meanwhile, Lord Bugen reflects on how the moment a woman's trusting face twists into despair never stops thrilling him. His silhouette darkens as he declares that the Bajak bastards cast him out. But honestly, that's just what he wanted. From now on, he'll keep devouring commoners and live the best life possible. Lord Bugen thinks back on the lady from the apothecary, noting she was the finest of the lot. But he got bored though, so he left the cleanup to the bandits. Walking down stone steps alone, he tries to remember her name but dismisses it as irrelevant anyway. Suddenly, armored guards confront Lord Bugen with spears raised. They address him directly, asking if he's Bugen Bajak. Then the lead guard announces they're placing him under arrest in the name of treason against the state. Lord Bugin's face fills with shock and sweat as the reality hits him. Meanwhile, Lady Olivia stands in an elegant, revealing dress adorned with pearls. An attendant reports that the arrangements are complete, and Lady Olivia acknowledges this calmly, telling them they've done well. She reflects on the sins of those who framed Cyclo Owen, declaring that at last the time of condemnation and judgment has come. Back to Lord Bugin, who stares at the guards in disbelief, repeating their charge of treason against the state. His face twists in anger and confusion as he protests that he's toyed with plenty of women until now, but they were all commoners, demanding to know what the hell is going on. A guard strikes Lord Bugin hard, knocking him back with violent force. Another guard orders the others to take him away, then the officer demands that Lord Bugin answer the question being asked. Meanwhile, down on the street, townspeople start gathering to see what's going on. One citizen protests that Officer Bugin is under arrest and this has to be a mistake. Another points out that it's Officer Bugin himself, and a third notices the guards are roughing up a citizen. The armored guards snap to attention, and one addresses their superior as captain. Then Lady Olivia appears in her elaborate armor and revealing outfit, completely commanding the scene. The crowd stares in shock. A townsperson blurts out in surprise that the commanding officer is a woman. But Lady Olivia explains this is not a case of mistaken arrest. The arrest is because of the recent serial rape and abduction cases. The townspeople start discussing among themselves. Someone recalls that the culprit's name was something like Owen, while another citizen questions whether the serial rape culprit was someone else entirely. Others just express straight disbelief. Meanwhile, Lord Bugin's face fills with stress and panic. His thoughts race as he realizes he should have pinned all his crimes on the commoners, but he can't figure out where he slipped up. He knows he needs to get out of this situation first. Then Lord Bugin tries to regain composure and insists this has to be some kind of mistake. He announces loudly that the culprit of the serial rape cases has already been punished and is no longer in this world. But Lady Olivia demands to know which noble Lord Bugin is talking about. Lord Bugin stammers that it's something he heard from a certain noble. Lady Olivia identifies the name as Lord Raven Crowheart. Lord Bugin sweats as Lady Olivia questions how he knows such a thing. Lord Bugin desperately declares that everyone knows the ducal house of the hero, insisting that people in this country can't possibly go against the title of an occupational skill. Lady Olivia's eyes narrow at his words. Then Lady Olivia strikes Lord Bugin violently with chains, and he screams in pain as the impact sends him reeling. Lord Bugin collapses to the ground. Lady Olivia stands over him and demands how he dares defile the name of the hero with that filthy mouth of his. But Lord Bugin's face twists into a crazed grin, half covered in shadow, calling Lady Olivia a worthless guard and threatening to assault her until she's nothing but a filthy rag. Meanwhile, the crowd of townspeople watches the scene unfold, two young men in the foreground staring with concern. Lord Bugin stands there sweating heavily as the crowd's mood shifts around him. The townspeople start muttering among themselves. One citizen questions whether he really is the culprit after all, while a young woman calls him a total piece of trash. Then the crowd's anger escalates quickly. Someone yells for everyone to get the bastard, and Lord Bugin curses under his breath as the situation spirals out of control. Suddenly, the mob descends on Lord Bugin and starts beating him. He tries to speak, but can barely get words out as the blows rain down on him. Meanwhile, off to the side, Lady Olivia's guards watch the scene unfold. One guard asks the captain if she should stop them, but another guard responds that they just calmed the crowd down because they were acting up. Lady Olivia observes the beaten Lord Bugin with satisfaction, noting that as expected of a policeman, he still looks lively despite the beating. She orders her guards to take him away, and the guards comply, dragging Lord Bugin off. Lady Olivia stares down at the battered Lord Bugin, declaring that now this is someone worth interrogating. Then the scene shifts to show a young woman with wavy hair standing in what appears to be a washroom. She reveals that her younger sister was one of the victims in that case, and she promises to make Lord Bugin confess what he's done. Lord Bugin's beaten face fills the panel as the woman's voice continues, swearing they'll get the truth from him even if they end up as rags in the process. Meanwhile, the scene transitions to the Heinberg Royal Palace. In the streets outside, townspeople are excitedly shouting about the hero and the saint. Inside the grand throne room with its soaring Gothic arches, someone comments on what a sudden summons this is. Another voice agrees that His Majesty the King's whims really are a problem. Maria stands there in formal attire right alongside Lord Raven, responding quietly that she supposes so. Lord Raven glances over at her and remarks what a boring reaction that is. Then a narration box appears, explaining that the clock user was deemed useless and rejected, cast out from the Craftsman's Guild, but in the depths of the dungeon he awakened to his true power. Maria admits that things aren't bad, but she's starting to get bored of it all. A flashback image shows her with this crazed expression as text reveals that ever since that day, Maria has become Lord Raven's obedient puppet servant. Meanwhile, an announcement echoes through the palace hallway, declaring that the heir of the Crowheart Duke's house, Hero Raven, has now arrived. Lord Raven walks through the corridor, muttering about how rude it is that no one even offered a word of thanks. An armored knight stands at attention nearby. Someone announces the arrival of Hero Raven and Saint Maria. The scene shifts to the grand throne room of the Kingdom of Heinberg with its towering columns. Lord Raven and Maria walk through the palace hall as the reigning monarch awaits them. The elderly king sits on his throne wearing his ornate spiked crown. The king declares the reason he summoned them here is none other than this. Meanwhile, Lord Raven and Maria continue walking across the checkered palace floor, and Lord Raven reacts to the king's words. The king begins telling them this is the story of his grandmother. Lord Raven thinks to himself that normally she would tell him to raise his head here. The king explains that his grandmother married and came from a distant country and was given a splendid mechanical watch from her homeland. The watch had a special structure and there was only one craftsman capable of handling it. A memory shows a young, smiling woman. Lord Raven processes this information about a watch and a craftsman. Then the king continues that he heard the clockmaker was dismissed from the artisan guild. The craftsman was soon sent to North Foria as the perpetrator of a serial rape case, sentenced to exile on the frontier as a criminal slave. Lord Raven's expression shifts to shock. The king reveals the craftsman's name is Cyclo Owen and asks Lord Raven if this name rings a bell. Suddenly, Lord Raven speaks up, addressing the king as Your Majesty. But the king cuts him off sharply, asking who told him he could raise his head. The king says Raven's name. He reminds Lord Raven that he understands why their nation cannot afford to worsen relations with the skill selection church. Lord Raven falls silent. The king explains it's for the battle against the demon folk of the neighboring nation, the Lustgold Empire. A dark image shows the demonic fortress looming in the distance. But then Lord Raven realizes with horror that the country actually knows about the things he's done. The king confirms that's right, which is exactly why they can't afford to discard those with special skills like his, even if he's been toying cruelly with commoners. The king adds that, however, this time things are different. The throne room stretches out before them, massive and imposing. The king looks down at Lord Raven with his stern expression, his crown and long white beard making him look like an absolute force to be reckoned with. He declares that Lord Raven has indirectly drawn his bow against the royal family itself. In the lower panels, Lord Raven tries to interject, calling out to wait and speaking hesitantly. But the king continues, explaining that the young man Lord Raven eliminated was actually a craftsman favored by his grandmother. The scene shows Maria standing near a large, ornate clock, with a memory image of the king's smiling grandmother visible in the background. Lord Raven's face shows pure distress as he protests that he's a hero and has no memory of doing such a thing. Internally, though, he realizes this is bad. He needs to calm things down somehow and fast. The scene pulls back to show Lord Raven and Maria standing together in the throne room. Lord Raven wonders where the hell they even found out about this, then suddenly suspects it was Maria who ratted him out. Someone in the room responds with a contemplative sound. Then the king tells Lord Raven he'll explain what would have happened if Lord Raven weren't a hero. The panel shows a beaten man's torso covered in bruises and marks clear evidence of severe torture. Another image shows this same man bowing before an armored figure in the throne room. The king asks Lord Raven if he could possibly recognize this man, then says Lord Raven's name.